Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Boise City Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing. A few things to start out with for tonight's proceedings. Everyone from the public entering the hearing virtually has been automatically muted and cannot speak. As the item you're interested in comes up for discussion, you'll be called upon and unmuted. There is a chat function in Zoom. This is not part of the record and should only be used if technical difficulties arise. Our procedures for public hearings begin with a presentation from the planning team, then we'll go to the applicant and then the representative of the Registered Neighborhood Association, followed by questions from the commission. After that, we proceed to public testimony, starting with those who are in person, then those who signed up on the sign-up sheet in advance, and then anyone else who raises their hands virtually. If you are attending through your telephone, you can type in *9 to raise your hand. Each member of the public is allowed up to 3 minutes for testimony. We are strict with this time as it is limited in code. Finally, the applicant is allowed 5 minutes for rebuttal, after which the hearing will be closed and the commission will deliberate and render a decision. Madam Chair, you have the floor.
Thank you, Crystal. We are citizen volunteers appointed by the mayor and approved by the city council. We make final decisions on conditional use permits, variances, and appeals, and recommendations to the city council on subdivisions, rezones, annexations, and code or comprehensive plan amendments. Any decision made tonight may be appealed to the city council, provided that the appeal is filed within 10 days of this hearing. In order to file an appeal, you must have given written or oral testimony at tonight's meeting. So that's why it's important that you give your name and address when you testify tonight. We utilize a consent agenda. This means that if the applicant agrees with the staff report and if there is no public opposition, the item will be placed on the consent agenda. All items that are placed on the consent agenda are approved with one motion without further public comment. For items not on the consent agenda, we will hold a full public hearing in the order just detailed a few minutes ago, with staff, applicant, neighborhood association, and then the public testimony. Thank you all for attending tonight, and will the clerk please call the roll?
Stitt.
Here.
Schaefer. Squires.
Here.
Blanchard.
Here.
Moore.
Here.
Gillespie.
Here.
Binfrock.
Here.
Danley.
Here.
Mooney.
Here.
8 present, 1 absent.
Okay, I'm going to do a little housekeeping first. So item number 4 has been withdrawn. This is PUD 22-1 for Rodney Evans and Partners, PLLC, and also SUB 22-2 at Hillview South Subdivision. This is located at 4301 West Hill Road. It was a conditional use permit for a planned residential development and a preliminary plat for a residential subdivision comprised of 1 common lot and 12 buildable lots. So again, item 4 has been withdrawn. Additionally, hang on, sorry, we've got a lot of moves today. Not quite there yet, no. Item 13 has also been withdrawn. This is PUD 22-6 for Hillary Grounds at 3010 North 36th Street, also including SUB 22-4 Rocco Manor subdivision. This is a conditional use permit for planned residential development comprised of 2 single-family homes and also preliminary and final plat for residential subdivision comprised of 2 buildable lots. So number 13 has also been withdrawn. Okay, then I'm going to move, we have a couple deferral requests. So I will move first to item number 2. This is CAR 21-42 for Sawtooth Development, deferred originally from April 4th, 2022 at 8710 South Pleasant Valley. This is an annexation of 81.23 acres with an M1D DA zone. So they are requesting deferral to August 1st. This is a 90-day deferral. Is there anybody present tonight who would like to testify that would not be able to return to that August 1st hearing date? Please virtually raise your hand or here in the chamber. Okay, seeing none, then I will entertain a motion.
Chair.
Commissioner Blanchard.
I move that we defer item number 2, CAR 21-42 for Sawtooth Development to August 1st. Second.
Great. We have a second from Commissioner Gillespie. If there's no discussion, will the clerk please call the vote?
Stead,
Aye.
Squires,
Aye.
Blanchard,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Gillespie,
Aye.
Binfrock,
Aye.
Danley,
Aye.
Mooney,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Okay, the next item for discussion is another deferral. This is PUD 21-55 for Cushing Terrell, deferred originally from February 7th, 2022, requesting deferral to June 6th, 2022. This is at 2189 West Boise Avenue, a conditional use permit for a planned residential development comprised of 14 multifamily units. Is there anybody present tonight that would like to testify in this item that would be unable to return to that June 6th date? Okay, seeing none, then I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Blanchard.
I move that we defer item 3 PUD 21-55 for Cushing Terrell to June 6th. Second.
Great, we have a second from Commissioner Gillespie. If there's no further discussion, will the clerk please call the vote?
Stead,
Aye.
Squires,
Aye.
Blanchard,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Gillespie,
Aye.
Binfrock,
Aye.
Danley,
Aye.
Mooney,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Okay, without objection, I will place the minutes from March 14th, 2022 on the consent agenda. The next item for consideration or for the consent agenda is item A. This is CUP 20-5 for ZDP LLC, requesting a time extension, a 2-year time extension. Is there anybody present tonight that would, I don't need to ask that. It's 2 years. Nobody knows their calendar in 2 years. I'm gonna just put it on the consent agenda.
Flop it on.
Do that. Okay, the next item is item number 1. This is CPA 22-1 for the city of Boise, the Sunset Neighborhood Plan, comprehensive plan text amendment to adopt the Sunset Neighborhood Plan. Is there anybody present tonight that would like to speak in opposition of this item? Please virtually raise your hand or here in person. Okay, seeing none, then item 1 will also be placed on the consent agenda. The next item is item number 5. This is PUD 22-5 for Kimberly Horn at 5522 West Franklin Road. This is a conditional use permit for a planned residential development comprised of 112 multifamily units on 2.74 acres. Is there anybody present tonight, or is the applicant present? And are you in agreement with the terms and conditions of the staff report? Let the record show that she is. And is there anybody present tonight that would like to testify on this in opposition of this item tonight? Okay, seeing none, then item 5 will be placed on the consent agenda. The next item is item 8. This is CAR 22-5 for platform architecture design at 9620 West Quarry Lane, a rezone of approximately 0.7 acres from R1B to R1C, also including PUD 22-14, a conditional use permit for a planned residential development comprised of 5 multifamily units. Is the applicant present? And are you in agreement with the terms and conditions of the staff report? Great, let the record show that they are. Is there anybody present tonight that would like to testify in opposition of this item? Okay, seeing none, we will place item 8 on the consent agenda. And the chair will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Blanchard.
I move that we place the minutes from March 14th. Item A, CUP 20-05 for ZDP LLC. Item 1, CPA 22-01 for the city of Boise. PUD 22-05 for Kimberly Horn. And item 8, CAR 22-05 for Platform Architecture Design, all on the consent agenda.
Great. I think the motion is to approve the consent agenda. Is that accurate, Commissioner Blanchard?
Correct, yes.
Thank you. Second from Commissioner Gillespie. If there is no discussion, will the clerk please call the vote?
Stead,
Aye.
Byers,
Aye.
Blanchard,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Gillespie,
Aye.
Finfrock,
Aye.
Stanley,
Aye.
Mooney,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Okay, moving along, we'll start then with item number 6. This is CAR 22-2 for Chrysalis Architecture and Planning at 8306 West State Street, a rezone of approximately 3 acres from R1A to R3D, also including PUD 22-8 at 8233 West Limelight Street and 8306 West State Street, a modification to conditional use permit of a planned residential development comprised of 70 multifamily units. And we'll first hear from staff. Please go ahead, Mr. Moser.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. The applicant is requesting a rezone from R1A, single-family residential, to an R3D, multifamily residential zone located at 8306 West State Street on approximately 1.92 acres. The conditional use permit for a planned residential development containing 70 units is also included. And as you can see from the aerial photograph, the neighborhood is a mix of residential uses, which include large multifamily developments to the north and east. In addition, commercial uses are located to the south across State Street. As seen on the slide, the requested R3 zone is compatible and consistent with the surrounding neighborhood, since the adjacent properties are zoned R3 and C2 to the west, east, and north and contain apartments. The neighborhood to the south across State Street is comprised of commercial uses and zones within Garden City. The requested zone is compatible with the comprehensive plan as it designates the site as mixed use on the land use map within which the proposed R3 zone is allowed and anticipated. And as you can see from this site plan, the development consists of 2 3-story apartment buildings, and a density of the project is a little over 36 units per acre. The apartment buildings are oriented toward Rose Street and State Street. With the recommended conditions of approval, the project will comply with all setbacks, requirements, parking standards, and will provide the required amenities. In summary, all the required findings of the rezone and the PUD have been met. The main issue to be discussed with this project is pedestrian and bike connectivity with the surrounding neighborhood, in particular, the condition of approval requiring the construction of a 12-foot wide multi-use path along State Street. The 12-foot wide multi-path has been identified within the State Street URD and the State Street Framework Plan and is encouraged by the Northwest Neighborhood Association Plan. Conditions of approval will require the project provide the pedestrian and bike connections to the adjacent properties to the north and west. With these this includes pedestrian and bike connections to the multi-use path from the project. In addition, the applicant site plan does show the multi-use path along State Street. The other main point of discussion is in regards to the landscape buffer along Rose Street and whether or not to install a drainage swale within it. The applicant requests to install a drainage swale within the landscape buffer similar to what was done to the north and is proposing of the same design or very similar design. However, the planning team recommends the draining swale be located outside the landscape buffer. The landscape ordinance discourages wet drainage swales from being located in landscape buffers outside of industrial areas. As such, the main concern the planning team has with locating the swale in this location is that it will detract from the pedestrian comfort along the street frontage, and putting the swale in there generally does not allow for the planting of street trees. The neighborhood association also expressed concerns with the project in terms of traffic loss of trees and the lack of current infrastructure to support the project, such as transit and pedestrian pathways. However, to address these concerns, I would note that the subject property is adjacent to State Street and was an integral part of the State Street corridor planning process. This substantial planning process identified the subject property as a neighborhood transit zone or TOD zone, which anticipates high-density residential along State Street with a future robust public transit system adjacent to the site. The loss of the street or trees on site will be mitigated for as per the landscape code. Also, the neighborhood association in their letter that you should have received discussed the possibility of extending a temporary pedestrian pathway approximately about 1,500 feet along the adjacent parcel to the east abutting State Street. However, the planning team did not consider this pathway construction as a condition of approval since it's an off-site improvement and also the length of the path itself. In conclusion, the planning team recommends approval of the rezone and the PUD. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moser. Thank you, Mr. Moser. Next, we'll hear from the applicant. Mr. Wilmot, hi. Let's please start with 10 minutes. Please start with your name and
Sure.
address.
Hi, I'm Scott McCormick. I'm the managing development partner for Limelight Villages 1 and 2. My address is 5321 West Hidden Springs Drive, Boise 83714. Thank you for the opportunity to testify you before the commission this evening. I just have a few slides and I'd like to just discuss some of the items that David brought up. This is a rendering of phase 1, our building 4. Just gives you a sense of the architecture and the look and style of the buildings. This is a combined site plan. Oh, was there another one before that?
Oh, there.
Right there, yeah, thanks. This is a recent aerial photograph that we took. I thought this would just be helpful for context. So right now we're building phase 1. That's 85 units. There are 4 buildings right there. And then to the right, you can see the subject site, which shows the irrigation canal to the south along State Street and just gives you a sense of just how things flow together. Next slide, please. This is the combined site plan, just indicates the 2 sites. Some important pieces just to note are where the entries are along Rose Street. There's a new entry on phase 2. There's an existing on phase 1. There's one on Limelight. And then the blue just shows some of the amenities that we've put into the project for our residents. Community room gym, pet park. We have some pet areas. We're adding a pool to phase 2, some gathering areas, and of course, the 12-foot multi-use path, which we have agreed with staff to put in, and we've designed a sort of a meandering path at this point, but we can discuss that a little bit further. Next slide, please. This is just a breakdown of the different unit types, 1 and 2 bedrooms, and we did add some studios to phase 2. Next slide, please. This is just the site plan just for phase 2. And we'll talk a little bit more about the multi-use pass, but we can go to the next slide, please. So the recommended condition approval number 10, we just had a note to that. David, next slide, please. You can see the blue here along State Street and where our meandering path is. Those are areas that just encroach slightly over our property line into the area that is part of the Canal District maintenance area and also the right-of-way for ITD. We're currently in discussions with ITD and we've completed application. And we've also been talking to the Canal District, and both of them have been positive about giving us an easement for those 2 areas. If we're unable to do that, we'll then move it back onto our property line. But I thought the commission would just want to know about that. Next slide. David mentioned that the neighborhood association, when we got approvals on phase 1, they also mentioned this whole idea of connectivity, trying to get pathways so that residents from this area where all the apartments are in the multifamily area could get to some of the services. We agreed with them that we would help start conversations and work with CCDC and try to come up with a way to facilitate this path. And we have been. We've met with them. We actually engaged our civil engineer to do this drawing, which shows a design of a 5-foot multi-use, 5-foot path to connect basically Rose Street to the North Point Shopping Center, which would then get people in a better direction to get to the bus stop and also to commercial services. We've had probably 3 meetings with CCDC. We've informed the Northwest Association. We've been doing that. And we've agreed as the developer to front the cost for the walkway if they can get it approved, and then CCDC through the Urban Renewal District would reimburse us over the next couple of years. So we're committed to doing this, but we don't control that. We don't own the property. We don't control it. And the agencies really have to work together in order to get this approved. So we hope that the commission wouldn't condition any of their approvals of the PUD and of the rezone on that, but we're committed to doing that. Next slide, please. Recommended condition number 7. This is a request that we have to modify this. Can we go to the next slide, David? Thanks. So we have swales, as David said, on both of the street frontages on Limelight Village 1, on Limelight Street and Rose Street. And we're asking the commission to approve this for the following reasons. Number one, phase 1 was approved by the city and ACHD, and we worked really hard with them to actually modify the design where we created some safety measures. And we also agreed to make sure that we complied with ACHD design and also some of the requests by the city. Secondly, there is high groundwater in the area, and it is challenging to handle stormwater drainage from the street. And so this is definitely a helpful way to do it. There are many bioswales in place in the surrounding properties. I'll show you that in the next slide. ACHD has approved for phase 2 these swales. They did have one condition, was they do not want us to put trees in the swale this time. And we do have enough room on the other side of the sidewalk to put the trees, and we've designed it such. And we know that this is not a general policy of the city in terms of they want this, but this is sort of the last section in this neighborhood. It just seems logical to us that the visual and engineering consistency should remain. And lastly, the Northwest Community Association, their letter that they submitted on recently to David's staff was they noted that based on our design for phase 1, that we improve safety, convenience, and aesthetics. Next slide, please. So this slide just shows you, these are the in-place or approved swales in the community. You can see the subject property in blue at the bottom. So our street there, all these streets here have swales in this entire area. And we're just asking for this one section from our property line up to State Street. That's all that I had for the commission, and we're here to answer questions. And Richard Wilmot, our planner and designer, is here with us too, if you have any questions for us.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Before we get to questions, I will ask to see if we have a representative from the Neighborhood Association. I think Mr. Llewellyn was online. Yeah, there he is. Just give us a second, Mr. Llewellyn, while we switch you over here. Go ahead and unmute, Richard, and then whenever you're ready, please start with your name and address. You'll have time.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me? Just checking
Yes.
here.
Yes.
Okay, great. Richard Llewellyn, 9170 Hill Road. So thank you, Commission. And we would also like to, I think it's fair to thank the applicant for communicating with us and for a number of improvements that they've made at this point. We're happy that the 12-foot multimodal path is going to be continued. It's now going to extend from Bogart Lane to the east to Rose Street. So that is good. That's, I don't know, a third of a mile or so, I think, along there. And this is going to help our neighborhood actually see the realization of the transit-oriented development that we hear about on State Street. But frankly, we don't see much of the actual infrastructure, and we certainly don't see the transit. And I do think that we just have to take every opportunity to encourage the city and the potential developers along this area to really push to actually make this something more than just transit-oriented development on paper. Yes, there is a bus line that goes along State Street, but it doesn't stop anywhere in our neighborhood except on Saxton Street, which is at the end of that interim pathway that we've discussed with the city during phase 1, and then it kind of seemed to have disappeared. But fortunately, the applicant, as they stated, we agree, I think they described that accurately, have been in discussions with CCDC, which we appreciate. But again, we really need to push all agencies involved, ITD, CCDC, ACHD, and the city of Boise especially, to actually see this through. If we're going to have transit-oriented development along State Street, and we don't have a bus stop, and we're not going to see a bus stop as far as we understand anywhere in the near future, because that probably relies on an HOV lane, which, as you know, isn't currently legal along this section of Highway 44. One way of at least allowing people to get to a shopping area and get to a bus stop would be to have this interim pathway. So I guess I won't say more about that now, other than we do appreciate the applicant for meeting with CCDC, and we hope the city will do its best to actually not just approve density along State Street without actually changing policy. In our neighborhood, it's no longer a matter of the chicken and the egg of transit versus a density in transit. With this application and one you'll see soon on Duncan Lane, there will be about 750 new units just going in here, all dependent upon transit that doesn't exist. And then if you add Eagle and Garden City, there's definitely 1,000 units or more in this area, and the bus, yes, drives by, but doesn't stop. So again, City of Boise, please follow through. Regarding the swales, we agree with the applicant. We oppose strongly swales originally in part 1, but we were happy with the changes they made. And let's stop here. Let's not do any more swales, but we understand the applicant's desire to continue that improved pattern that they are doing for part 1. So we're okay with that. And again, we do appreciate their agreement to do the multimodal pathway. So that's all I have for you. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Lewin. With that, we'll move to questions from the commission.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Danley.
I've got a few questions if I can. David, one of the questions I had to do with the memo from the fire department. And I'm curious if you can just sort of shed light on it. Page 575 of the report. Basically, the initial report or the initial letter from the fire department said, and the conditions, I guess we're also here, basically said that only so much could be built before the next fire station was to be built, and not to move ahead with, I think it was building 5. But then in the letter that came back again from the fire department, it said, go ahead, but don't occupy, no certification of occupancy for, I think it was the top floor of building 5. And I'm curious, do you have any insight as to what happened that we went from don't build an entire building because we don't have a fire department, on site, fire station on site, to build a building, but don't occupy the top floor?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, the fire department, I think the applicant had some additional discussion with them regarding the original rezone application or their original rezone letter, and kind of discussed some things additional to them. I guess the fire department did some additional review. I don't know what their calculus was, but they ultimately came back and said, you can build both buildings, but you're going to be limited on the occupancy. I believe it is of the top floor building 6, I believe actually what it was. And so they're phasing the occupancy to ensure adequate response times to the site. But they can build both buildings, it's my understanding. It's just they're going to phase the occupancy of building 6, that 3rd floor.
But ultimately, we're confident that firefighting abilities will be provided, of course, and so forth.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, the fire department had reviewed this. I have trust in their expertise on this, and they submitted that additional letter.
Okay.
Go ahead. Just start with your name and address for the record, please.
Richard Wilmot, Chrysalis Architecture, 3914 East Presidential Meridian, Idaho. My discussions with Mike Pisangio was such that we were just looking for options in terms of the buildings and how they would be sequenced and the phases of construction. And it didn't have as much to do with the actual construction of the building as much it was the occupancy. So we could allow for the construction and the issuance of the building permits, but we couldn't actually occupy until the fire station was fully staffed and ready for operation. Beyond that, it wasn't actually as much of a concern for fire protection as it was for actually emergency services. So ambulance responses, other sorts of emergency service response times. So it wasn't as much a fire question as it was just emergency ability to provide emergency services for that many tenants. Probably given because of what's happened with Silver Cloud next to us to the west. But so our question was the larger, more complex building, which is that of building 6, the bigger building. That building would take a lot longer to construct. Building 5 would be a much simpler construction. We just wanted to have the option based on what the contractor's recommendation would be for actually phasing the project. So we were just looking for a little bit of flexibility there.
Great, thank you. Madam Chair,
Commissioner Danley, go ahead.
questions if I can. One for Mr. Lewin. Mr. Lewin, I know that with respect to the bioswales, it sounds like you're okay with this. But one of the things that occurred to me was that the north-south street, I think it's row, is the possibility of folks coming off of State Street at a high rate of speed. And what I understand is that ACHD has requested no trees to be planted in those swales. Trees act as traffic calming. They help to get people to go the speed that we want. So absent that condition, because of that condition, that's a tool that's sort of taken out of.
Sorry to interrupt. I think he was dropped. So he's probably not hearing your question is what I'm saying.
Okay. I can come back to it when he returns.
Yeah, why don't you? I think. Oh, he's back. Mr. Llewellyn.
Yes, thank you. I was kind of hanging there, so I apologize, Commissioner Danley. I heard my name, but then screen went black and I couldn't hear you. So I didn't hear your full question.
I'll try to be succinct for time.
Sure.
So you mentioned that you're okay with the bioswales as requested by the applicant. I've understood you to be for that. But the condition from ACHD was such that no trees, in this case, basically street trees sort of would be permitted into that swale. So the neighborhood, this is your neck of the woods. One of the abilities of street trees have is to slow traffic, to calm traffic. So folks coming off of State Street going towards Eagle direction, going, I'm guessing at 40, 45 or even faster, making that right-hand turn. This is one sort of tool in the toolkit. And the Sunset neighborhood, by the way, which I know is not yours, literally just as approved, had Vision Zero statements all over it, which this is what that is. So I'm curious your general response about this sort of trade-off between the utilization of bioswales with in this case, not permitting street trees.
I appreciate the question, Commissioner Danley. So just to think on my feet here quickly. So I kind of heard two things from you, and I may be interpreting them. I might be interpreting them correctly in what you're thinking about. So trees could both tend to slow traffic, if I understood you correctly, which I would agree with, and also they could reduce the visibility. And those two things, the reduction of visibility, of course, could be dangerous. Slowing traffic is good. So I'm kind of seeing both of those things. I completely agree with you, though, that this is a very dangerous intersection on Rose Street, exactly for the reason that you said. People coming west, cruising, finally getting out of Boise, they go faster than 45 or 50 along State Street. And then, so people don't want to slow down too much before they hang a right onto Row, because everybody's concerned about getting rear-ended if they slow down. So people tend to go into Row very quickly. I don't have the expertise, I guess, to balance those two things. I was happy to hear that if ACHD doesn't want swales or trees in the swale, that the applicant was willing and able to put them next to the swale on their property or out of the right of way. But I guess this is the safety of this area with respect to that high-speed traffic coming off of State Street is a real issue. And I guess I'll just leave it at that and leave it to your expertise, because I can't quite weigh those competing factors possibly. So thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman,
Commissioner Gillespie.
I have a question for both the city and the applicant with respect to the swales. Question one is why for the previous development, why did the city agree to put the swales in the landscape buffer previously? And why did the applicant request it previously? And my second question for the applicant is if the swales are not in the buffer, where are you going to put the stormwater retention?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, the swales on the property to the north, and I think Scott might have a better idea on this, they were ultimately decided at an appeal at council. Council ultimately decided to put or allowed the swales to go as part of an appeal of that original development. I think there was a trade-off that council reviewed as part of that whole process. I don't know quite what their thinking or what their calculus or the reasoning for it, but Scott might have a better idea. He was there.
Mr. McCormick, go ahead.
Sure. When we were working with the Northwest Community Association and the city council, what we came up with was just some measures to make it more safe for people who are parking on the street. So we added a few things. We added a 2-foot flat landing right off the street and on the other side next to the sidewalk. And we're doing the same in this case. Also, we worked with them to have a consistent design in terms of the drainage of the swale. So we are making sure that we actually signed a maintenance agreement that we are going to maintain it the correct way. And then we also agreed with them that we would put the trees in the back slope towards the sidewalk and grow them there, and had a certain spec on how those trees would be grown and what type of trees would be in there. So those were the reasons. Also, we added some basically some crossing so that down the length of the swale, there's a place for, if I got on my car, I can walk across like a little bridge. And we put all of those in, and we would do the same on this swale. The only difference was between then and now, ACHD changed their typical design of the swale, and they just don't want them in there because a lot of other people that have done the swales have put trees in the wrong area. They've not done them correctly. Now we've made a commitment to do it, and we also have kind of an agreement that shows that. I would speak also to the calming measures for traffic. Definitely, it's true that people come off there fairly fast off State Street. But even though we wouldn't have the trees there, we'd have the sidewalk, and right behind the sidewalk, we'd have trees right along there. So it's a little bit of a difference in depth in terms of, but you'll still see the trees. And then we have some trees along the corner. Richard, yeah. So we feel like it's not gonna be that big of a difference in terms of the visual impact of trees. They'll still be there. You'll still see them.
Madam Chairman,
Commissioner Gillespie.
my second question was what happens if the application as proposed is adopted, which prohibits you from storing stormwater in the swales? Where will you put the stormwater then?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, for us right now, what we're facing, even on Limelight Village 1, is increased construction costs. We're over budget for sure. We want to provide housing that's needed in Boise. And we've had some estimates on phase 2, but we know it's going to go up. But the hardship it gives us is that we're going to have to put in more pavers and more of these drainage basins. It requires us to do earthwork, and we have to put these basins in. And there's some, they're called storm tech drains, and it's a equipment that we have to buy. And so it's basically costs us a lot more money to do it on site, and we have to bring it we have to change our plans basically on the site. It's more expensive for us to do it.
Thank you.
Okay. It looks like no more questions from the commission. So next we'll move to public testimony. I do have one person that was signed up in advance, Claudia Friendsworth. Do we have Claudia either online or in person here? I don't see that name. So if you're on somebody else's computer, please virtually raise your hand so we can see there. Or if there's anybody else that would like to testify on this item, please raise your hand or come up to the podium. Okay, Seeing none, then we'll ask for, it would be rebuttal from the applicant. There hasn't really been any opposition at this point, but if there's anything else you'd like to say, now's your chance for that.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I just want to thank the commission as well as David. I think he's done a great job on the report. And I would just ask you to really consider the swale issue. It really does make a big difference for us in terms of the costs. And we think that it really provides a consistent visual look. And we do think it's going to meet all the requirements as well as meeting all of the alternative compliance requirements that the city has. We'll meet all of those requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Okay, with that, we will close the hearing and render a decision.
Madam Chairman,
Commissioner Gillespie,
where are we?
item 6.
I move that we recommend approval of CER 22-2 to the city council, that we approve PUD 22-8 with all the conditions in the staff report except for item 7. I would replace the last sentence in condition number 7 to read as follows. The landscape buffer may contain drainage swales provided that they conform to the same general design standards as those previously approved to the north.
Second.
And I would just ask.
Sorry, we had a second from Commissioner Mooney. Thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner Gillespie.
Madam Chairman, and I'd just like a nod that maybe from the applicant and the city that is sufficiently clear in terms of direction. So I'm seeing 2 nods. So Madam Chairman, good application. I like a lot about it. I like having the path back, the 12-foot wide path. I know my colleague Chris is deeply concerned about the meander, but I'll let that get straightened out later, so to speak. I think the swale issue, if the city council was comfortable with it, I think there is some benefit to continuing it. So I'm not that worried about it. And I do think that try to make this development as efficient as possible from both a space and a cost point of view is a worthy goal. So I support it.
Great. Any other comments before we wrap it up?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Mooney.
thanks to the applicant and working with the neighborhood association, especially with the offsite mitigation on the temp path to Saxton. Oh, I hope that works out. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Blanchard.
just very briefly, I just want to commend the architect on this one for the site design. I really like the site design, the way the building fronts State Street, the way it should. And so it's really a model look for the way we want to see our corridor. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we have a motion.
Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Danley.
Sorry, there's a couple things I think to add to this. Please don't meander that. Please don't meander that. We don't walk, we don't bike ride in a meandering way. This is a commuting corridor. That's why literally millions has been put into this corridor for all the TOD stuff that's been mentioned and so forth. I was at a meeting today at Valley Ride. The money's coming. The construction is coming. I promise you, all of the 16 plus years of planning is starting to actually bear fruit. And a lot of the things that we've been discussing ad nauseum is going to start happening. So I wanted to say one thing too, is to add on to the design, the fact that you did pull things up the street. That's beautiful. That's what we need more of. And I commend you on that. With regard to the Rose Street thing, in the future, I agree with Commissioner Gillespie that I can see where the direction of the council would go, but trees first, then the vulnerable people behind the moving threat that's coming 45 miles an hour toward them, right? So that's what hopefully in the future we can see more of. But overall, a good application, just things I thought you should hear.
Thank you, Commissioner Danley. Okay, with that, we have a motion on the table from Commissioner Gillespie and seconded by Commissioner Mooney to recommend approval of CAR 22-2 and to approve PUD 22-8 with the edit to item number 7 to read that the landscape buffer may contain swales as long as the design standards are equal to the previous development on that property. Something like that. Is that what you have, Crystal? Okay, good. We're close. Okay, and with that, will the clerk please call the vote?
Stead,
Aye.
Squires,
Aye.
Blanchard,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Gillespie,
Aye.
Finfrock,
Aye.
Stanley,
Aye.
Mooney.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number 7, this is CVA 22-6 for White Leisure Real Estate LLC at 513 North Milwaukee Street. This is a variance to exceed the maximum sign background area for an existing freestanding sign. We'll first hear from staff. Let's go ahead.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the commission. The item before you is a request for a variance to exceed the maximum background area for an existing sign located at 513 North Milwaukee Street in a C2D zone. Signage for the West Park Town Plaza Shopping Center currently includes 2 center signs, 4 monument signs, and various wall signs. The existing center sign located at the intersection of Milwaukee Street and West Park Street is the subject of the variance request. The development code allows center signs to have a maximum background area of 150 square feet. The existing sign was constructed with approximately 270 square feet of background area, as was allowed by a conditional use permit approved in 1989. The variance requested by the applicant would increase the total background area of the sign to approximately 340 square feet. The applicant's letter of intent cites a past conditional use permit for a sign with 300 square feet of background area in this location as justification for their request. The applicant also identified the curve in Milwaukee Street and the large setbacks of these existing buildings from the street as factors which make it difficult for passing cars to read the wall signs on the buildings. Concerns regarding the increased prevalence of online shopping and the COVID-19 pandemic's impact on brick and mortar retailers were also raised by the applicant. The planning team finds that none of the justifications provided by the applicant constitute a hardship or exceptional circumstance. Furthermore, the request is in conflict with the comprehensive plan, which encourages providing a hierarchy of signs that are integrated with the overall character of the development. The proposed design would also create visual clutter on the face of the sign, thereby reducing drivers' ability to safely read it while passing by. The planning team recommends denial of the variance and recommends that the applicant reallocate the existing sign area or incorporate additional signage types into the development in order to comply with the requirements of the development code.
Thank you, Ms. Mortensen. Next, we'll hear from the applicant. You'll have up to 10 minutes. Please start with your name and address.
Yes, Jeff Huber, 8385 West Emerald Street, Boise. Sabrina, could we have the first? This is an aerial of our shopping center that was constructed in 1989 in conjunction when the mall was constructed also. It's a large center consisting of 239,000 square feet. There's 31 tenants on 13 separate parcels. And there's currently two monument signs and four monument signs and 2 pylon signs. Could I have the next slide, Sabrina? As you can see on that location. Can we go to the next slide? There's 5 pads along Milwaukee Street, plus the Red Robin on West Park, which really blocks the visual visibility from Milwaukee Street, especially when you're going on this curve, because the driver's attention is focused on the curve. Could we have the next slide, Sabrina? These are the 2 current signs that are there. The Target sign was approved in 1989, and they took the entire pylon for their advertising. It was the first Target in the state, and the city welcomed them with open arms, and we were happy to have them. And they insisted on taking the whole pylon. The second pylon sign, Ross was constructed at the same time. They wanted half of the pylon, and they got it too, and they were happy to have that store in Boise. Boise was just starting to bloom in the national spotlight at that time. Can we have the next slide, Sabrina? This is the view from the intersection of West Park Street and Milwaukee, and you can see that the visibility is non-existent at that point. We have the next slide, Sabrina. As you drive down, just before you enter the curve, the visibility it doesn't even exist there. And the shops that are, there's a number of shops that face the north. They're right in this area here. We have the next slide, Sabrina, please. And then the next one, that's, again, it's blocked. This is the view from the entrance to the mall across the street. And you can see that, again, Chase Bank is blocking the visibility of the shops, and they're set back so far from the street. At this point, from the sidewalk back to the storefront is over 400 feet. Do we have the next slide, Sabrina, please? This is a view from if you're looking to the south from the corner down there is the Target sign, and again it's blocked by Carl's Jr. Can we have the next slide, Sabrina? Now at this point you're coming in right at the end of the curve, and you've got to pay attention to the street, and there's the only point that we really have some visibility of our shops in the back. And the shops to the right of Carl's here, there's a number of small shops there that you can't look and see them unless you're looking out the back of your car. We have the next slide, Sabrina. Here's a couple shots from inside the parking lot. We have over 100 mature trees in the Target area and the shop area that block the storefronts from anybody even walking down the sidewalk. We have the next slide, Sabrina. Again, there's another shot from in the parking lot. The next slide, Sabrina. Again, in the parking lot. The next slide. Now the curve in the road, we didn't put that there on purpose. We put that there because Mrs. Ott, who owned that old farm there, wouldn't ever sell her property. She was quite a character, a real pioneer. You read about people like her in the history books. And she and her husband stayed on that farm until they died. They were offered millions of dollars by the mall owners. They were offered a lot by us, and she wouldn't not leave the farm. So the road had to take that big curve there to connect down to Fairview. And that is an unusual site characteristic in our mind that throws the general motorist off when they're going past our center, and they cannot see our signage. Can we have the next slide, Sabrina? I'm going to give you 4 or 5 examples here of typical centers that are about the same size as ours, and they're all parallel to the street, and the streets are always straight. That is the Fairview Plaza West on Fairview, Eagle and Ustick. There's a number of commercial there. Canyon Plaza Shopping Center in Nampa. Former Shopco on Broadway, and the shops on Milwaukee, just down the street from us. Those shops are only 150 feet from the sidewalk to the front of the shops, and only 60 feet for the Dollar Tree store on the end. We have the next one, Sabrina. That is the view from of the sign if you were stopped at the stoplight. Going south on Milwaukee. That's the most important spot for our signage to be. It's the only place you really can see it well. Can we have the next one, Sabrina? So we're requesting 68 additional square feet for 16 tenants to just tag on to the bottom of that sign. It's the most effective spot for the signage to be. And there's already structure there, there's power there, and it's the most logical place for it to be. Can we have the next one, Sabrina? This is a plat of our shopping center. We have 13 separate parcels. As per the code, we could be allowed additional monument signs on Milwaukee Street, Emerald Street, West Park Street. We even have a frontage on Benjamin Street. But in keeping with the intent of the code and the comprehensive plan, they discourage clutter. And that's what we're trying to accomplish here tonight, is to not have additional monument signs cluttering up the street and the view from the street, but put it all right on that one pylon. We have the next one, Sabrina. Oh, back up one. I've got to take a break now and let the other people that are here speak, and then we'll get to the rest of my presentation.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Huber. Okay. Okay, so you're finished with your presentation. Oh, for the rebuttal. Okay, excellent. Perfect. Great. Thank you. Okay, great. Is there anybody present to represent the neighborhood association? That would be the West Boise bench, Mr. Cockrell. Come on up. Please start with your name and address for the record.
Yeah, Chris Cockrell, 10460 Saranac Drive. So the West Boise Neighborhood Association understands and sympathizes with the struggles local small businesses face and the need for adequate signage to direct customers to their business. We also understand that there may be signage options for the West Park Shopping Center that conform with Boise City Code, but place those new signs in places that make it harder for consumers to see the sign or create additional traffic hazards as drivers are trying to read the signs while they move through this congested and curvy road is probably not a good plan. Adding additional signage to the existing pylon signage structure consolidates the needed signage into an existing signage structure with a location that is optimally suited for visibility and safety of passing traffic. So the West Boise Neighborhood Association supports White Leaser Development Company's variance request for additional signage. I should point out that, we've had in our private Facebook group, right, about 90 eyes on it. So we have given people the opportunity to see it, to make comments, and there's not opposition to this. We understand that, yeah, this is outside of, I guess, what the code ought to include, or, we're obviously already outside of what the code ought to include. But again, sitting at that intersection, that's where people see it. It makes it very easy to, while you're stopped at the sign, to see the signage. It seems like it's a good vision. I think that's a good way to see a lot of the commercial area around the mall. I know that is an emphasis where we've wanted to see what we can do to improve what's happening there. Can we make it a better, a more vibrant shopping center? Can we pull more people to the area based on how we do that? And we feel like this is a good opportunity. So we wanted to make sure we at least put in our 2 cents of saying, yeah, we do think this is a good plan. It consolidates. It helps with what I think is hardship for quite a few small businesses that don't have good visibility. And yeah, I also think the physical geographical layout of that area isn't normal. My understanding is that you have to have a hardship to be approving a variance like this. And I do think both of those aspects come into it. I'm obviously not an expert when it comes to signage code, right? So I don't know what all the downsides end up being, but there's probably, you guys can tackle that. So thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Cockrell. Okay, so next we will move to questions from the commission for staff, the applicant, or the neighborhood association. You're part of the public? Okay, we'll get to that after our questions from the commission. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Danley.
Just a quick one for the applicant. If we were to deny this request, as you just stated, do you believe that you have other opportunities because of this? I think you said 13 different parcels to erect other different pedestal and types of sign.
Monument
Would-
signs, yes.
If we were to approve it, I guess I should back up. If we were to approve it, what would stop you from putting in more as per what you just said?
As a condition of approval, if you were to approve it, we would forego our right to have other monument signs on that center. They don't make sense to us at the other far end on Emerald. The shops are so far away from that. And we really feel this is the best place for it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Gillespie? No? I thought you had your hand on the trigger over there. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, then we will move to public testimony. Thank you. I do have a couple people signed up here. Oh wait, actually Jeff spoke already too. So Cheryl, please come on up. You'll have 3 minutes. Please start with your name and address.
Sure. I'm Cheryl Livingston and I reside at 11950 West Cactus Court in Boise. And I'm here tonight representing our business Mixed Up Nutrition and 15 other businesses in the West Park Shopping Center that has no signage on Milwaukee Street. The signage allows customers to locate us and also advertise us. Mixed Up Nutrition is located directly behind the Noodle Company and Carl's Jr. with no signage. The pad buildings and grown trees that were required by the city block our business name from view while driving up or down Milwaukee Street. The curve in the road on Milwaukee Street creates a hazard for the health, safety, and welfare of drivers while trying to find the business they're looking for. The drivers are focused on driving the curve and pass by our businesses. This has created a hardship on our new business that we acquired in December of 2020 in the West Park Center, especially trying to recover from the pandemic as well. We are a nutritious shake and tea business, and we are losing customers by not being able to find us. We get phone calls asking, "Where are you?" But then they have gone on their way somewhere else already, and maybe next time they will come by. We're asking the commission to kindly grant a variance on the existing ordinance in place. Signage on Milwaukee will enable a driver to locate our business at a glance while driving. This would be safer. With this hardship and going into the summer months, it is essential to have signage as we grow our business at the West Park Shopping Center. We appreciate your consideration and your approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Livingston. Is there anybody else that would like to testify on this item? Please come on up or virtually raise your hand. Okay. Seeing none, then we would move back to rebuttal from the applicant. Mr. Huber, you can continue with your presentation.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, the landscape of the mom and pop brick and mortar tenants has changed dramatically since 1989, especially with the advent of online shopping. And online shopping accounts for 21% of all retail sales now in the United States and is growing by 2 to 3% per year. It's increasingly difficult for the small retailers to compete in a world with pandemics, mandated store closures, supply line interruptions, outrageous gas prices, online shopping, and next day delivery services that are free to advertise every day in our neighborhood. Could I see the next slide? I'm sure we're all familiar with this prime delivery service going in everybody's neighborhood. There's no restrictions on their advertising. Could I see the next slide? Who would have thought that Sears, the darling of Wall Street, would be the most read, had the most read publication in the country in their catalog, second only to the Bible? Who would have thought that it would fail? If there are members of the commission that are thinking that if you approve this tonight, that you'd have to approve everybody else that comes before you for additional signage. That's not true. The code is clear that an applicant cannot point to a non-conforming sign as a justification for their application to be approved. So each application has to stand on its own. We think ours is unique due to the curve in the road. If you should choose to approve it tonight, based on a unique circumstance that creates a hardship, you'll be well within the parameters that the code is written. So tonight we request that you approve this application and give these mom and pop retailers the boost up that they need to be competitive in today's retail world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huber. Okay, with that, we'll close the public portion of the hearing, and the item is before the commission.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Finfrock.
I move that we deny CVA 22-6.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Gillespie. Is there discussion,
Yeah,
Commissioner
so-
Finfrock?
As staff pointed out in their report, there's no natural hardship or exceptional circumstances that would allow for the variance. And with that prior CUP, we've already allowed for almost double this, square foot of signage that is allowed by the code. So we've already created that visual distraction. And although, I think we sympathize with businesses that are trying to, advertise in different ways. I do think that we've already allowed for, again, almost double what the code allows. And I just don't see that there's any reason for an additional square footage that would allow for, over double the variance. So I am not in support of this application tonight.
Madam Chairman.
Commissioner Gillespie.
So I support the motion to deny. So, my thinking is always, what would be the perfect thing to do if I was the boss of everything? And indeed, if I was the boss of everything, I might say this is a good solution to the problem that the applicant has. Sadly, my wife is actually the boss of everything. And in this particular case, so is the city council who wrote the code. They wrote the code the way they wrote the code. I always believe rationally and intentionally. So if a side effect of the way the code is written is that the applicant puts up more signs, then that is the code that we have. So I agree with Commissioner Finfrock's simple analysis that a very long curve doesn't create a hardship on a very large site. So while I can understand the goodness of the applicant's request, in this particular case, I have to vote against it.
Okay. If there is no further discussion, we have before us then a motion to deny CVA 22-6 for White Leisure Real Estate at 513 North Milwaukee Street. Will the clerk please call the vote?
Stead.
Aye.
Squires.
Aye.
Blanchard.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Gillespie.
Aye.
Finfrock.
Aye.
Stanley.
Aye.
Mooney.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break before we pick up on item number 9. So we will be back at about quarter after.
21-66, a modification of a conditional use permit for a planned residential development comprised of 11 multifamily units on 0.87 acres located at 10145 Overland Road in an NOD zone. The subject property is surrounded by a mixture of uses such as offices, single-family residential, an assisted living facility, and a church, and it is located approximately a quarter mile southeast of the Regional Activity Center at the intersection of 5 Mile Road and Overland Road. There's extensive commercial development along Overland to the north, east, and west. The density in the NOD zone is 14.5 units per acre, and at 0.87 acres, this lot would allow for up to 12 units. The applicant proposes a 4-plex and a 7-plex for 11 units total. The applicant plans to modify 2 conditions of the original CUP from 2008 that limited development to 1 story, but did not provide a height limit and called for a 15-foot perimeter setback to the east and west side of the parcel. The applicant proposes a 2-story 4-plex at 25 feet to the midline of the roof and a 7-plex at 31 feet to the midline of the roof on the 3rd story. The applicant also proposes to reduce the east and west setbacks to 10 feet, which is more in line with the development code. This development is required to have 14 parking spaces on site, and the applicant is providing 18. The original development required cross-access and maintenance agreement, but this was never recorded. A condition of approval will require that the access agreement be recorded prior to the issuance of any building permits. Additionally, the applicant will need to utilize the solid waste facilities abutting the common parking lot or provide their services on site. Opposition to the project has been received concerning the height, hours of operation, parking, and lack of open space. While the applicant does intend to modify the height condition of CUP 08-10, it is not out of line with the underlying zone or existing development. The NO zone allows for heights up to 35 feet. The office buildings along Overland are all at least 18 feet in height, and the assisted facility is approximately 21 feet to the midline of the roof. The tallest point on the proposed development is 31 feet to the midline and located in the middle of the building with step downs on either side. The residential use should not negatively impact the hours of operation for existing offices, and the development is proposing to provide the 18 parking spaces on site when 14 are required. Additionally, the applicant plans to provide the 100 square feet of open space required by the development code in the form of private patios or balconies. In conclusion, the planning team recommends approval of PUD 21-66 with conditions, and I will stand for questions.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from the applicant. I see a hand up online here. Mr. Delgado, please go ahead. Start with your name and address. You'll have up to 10 minutes.
Hi, my name is Jory Delgado. I am with JBI Elemental. My address is 421 East Track Stand Lane. I'm going to keep it very brief on my end as the staff did a really good job helping us present this project. I am in agreement with all of the approval criteria that was listed in the staff approval or the staff report. So I will leave it open for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Delgado. Okay, with that, we'll move to the Neighborhood Association. Do we have Tanya Clough in attendance from SWACA? Okay, please start with your name and address. You'll have up to 10 minutes.
Okay, Tanya Clough, 10800 West Smoke Ranch Drive, Boise 83705. So I'm with Southwest Ada County Alliance, and we oppose this development. First off, the main thing we see is the height. I mean, it's nowhere compatible with the surrounding area. We're worried about the parking. But the main thing we're worried about is the open space. I was shocked, and I think the rest of us were shocked to learn that private patios and balconies can be used as open space. In the design code here, it says 100% of required open space may be in the form of common open space available to all residents and meeting requirements of provision 3.541. I would think that open space means open space for everyone. Unless tenants are going to allow other residents to go on their balconies and patios to recreate and converse. You were talking earlier about, the code's in place for a reason. They're asking to modify, the requirements from 1 story to 3 stories. They're asking to reduce the setbacks. And then the issue with the open space using the patios and balconies. Those are our concerns. And we hope that you either modify this or reject it, one or the other. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, we'll go to questions from the commission for staff, the applicant, or the neighborhood association. Yeah, don't go too far.
Madam Chairman.
Commissioner Gillespie.
So this question for the city. So both the staff report and the testimony is referenced to previous CUP. Those are always tricky. So can you talk about exactly what that CUP covered, when it was issued, and what it said about the height of the building? And to the extent that you can you talk about why some previous commissioner council chose to place height restrictions, if that's in fact what the CUP does?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Gillespie. So the previous CUP was approved in 2008, I believe it was CUP 08-10, and that approved offices along Overland and the assisted living facility that has been built currently. There was basically some provision to potentially provide a daycare there, but that would have had to come back for modification, and that never happened. So basically the height was not actually put out in a square footage. It was limited to 1 story, which doesn't really give a whole lot of specifics what they were looking for. Did I answer your other questions, or is there something else?
Commissioner Gillespie.
Madam Chairman. So the CUP was for a bigger space than is covered by this application.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Gillespie, correct. The CUP was for the entire area that is zoned in OD.
Okay.
And then there was parts that did not get built that were planned.
Correct. Madam Chairman.
Commissioner.
And so the city doesn't really know why that 1 story, or presumably, is it feet? Is it like 15 feet, or just say 1 story?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Gillespie, correct. It just says 1 story.
Okay, and we don't really know why that was put into that CUP, 14 years ago?
Correct.
Thank you. I'll let other people.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Finfrock.
I had a question for the city as well. So I was looking through the code, and I think it says for, here, let me find it. The neighborhood office with design review, the standards are development shall be of a scale and character similar to nearby residential development to promote compatibility. And so the way I read it is maybe on the south and east with that residential units there, are they 1 story or are they 2 story? And do you read the code to say that we should keep the development similar to that height?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Finfrock. So to the east, there are 1 and 2 story houses. I think the one that is closest is 1 story, but the one directly south is 2 story. And again, the assisted living facility is residential, in practice, and that's about 25 feet high. It is 1 story, but taller than your typical residential unit. And I would say that 31 feet is fairly similar to 25 feet, especially with the distance between the buildings.
Okay, Madam Chair.
Commissioner
So
Finfrock.
for clarification, the residential units, you say, what is exactly 25 feet? I'm sorry, if you could repeat that.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Finfrock, the assisted living facility is 25 feet to the midline of the roof.
Okay, and the residential units are probably 2 story at most, you're saying on the.
Correct.
It's the south and east. Okay, all right, thank you.
Madam Chairman.
Commissioner Gillespie.
While everybody else is reloading, let me throw out a question to the city about setbacks. Could you just review for everybody what's in the record in terms of proposed versus required setbacks for this site?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Gillespie. So the proposed setbacks for the perimeter of the entire development as approved by the CUP, the required setbacks, for the CUP were 15 feet. The proposed setbacks by the applicant are 10 feet. The setbacks when abutting residential in the NOD zone without the CUP would also be 10 feet.
Madam Chairman.
Commissioner Gillespie.
So in fact, essentially the applicant is asking us to look to the underlying zone and look completely past the CUP for both height and setback issues.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Gillespie, that is what the modifications would be for the CUP.
Thank you.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair.
Commissioner Mooney.
Parking. So the applicant's parking is basically for staff is on site, their parcel. As I look at the parcel, which it also includes the driveway, correct?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Mooney, that is correct.
So the neighborhood and the business concerns fronting on Overland, their parking concerns are, their overflow parking is effectively on this parcel currently. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Mooney. So essentially, this parking lot has been acting just for these businesses, though the parking spots on the other parcel have been utilized at different points in time. And there was supposed to be a cross access and parking and maintenance agreement recorded, but that never happened.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Moore.
So on that, so off of Countryman, there's two, it looks like empty pads, and this is to the west side of the site. I think they're zones commercial. Is that planned to be commercial? Are there any current plans or development agreements or anything like that for those two parcels that you're aware of?
Commissioner Moore, sorry, Madam Chair and Commissioner Moore, are you speaking to the parcels that are off of Countryman Drive?
Yes, those ones to the west.
Okay, Madam Chair, Commissioner Moore, those are owned by a church and we have not received any development applications regarding those parcels.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Moore.
So there, I think if I'm reading the elevations correctly, there's one building that's 2-story and one building that's 3-story. So as I read it, the 2-story building is on the east side of that kind of roundabout. And then the 3-story building is on the west side, and it's just one apartment too. It's pretty minimally 3-story, and that would be on the west side next to that kind of commercially zoned piece. Is that kind of correct?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Moore, that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no more questions from the commission, then we'll go to, thank you. We'll go to public testimony. We have a few people on the sign up list, but why don't we, if anybody is in house and would like to testify, please just come up to the podium. It's okay if we queue up a little bit. Each person will get 3 minutes, and please start with your name and address.
You got it. My name is Mike Hillman. Address is 10159 West Overland. We own the office building that is to the south of the proposed 3-story, 7-unit building. A lot of the questions you guys posed were questions that we have as residents of that current neighborhood office development. I actually pulled the CUP from April of 2008, and the verbiage that we provided to staff as well as the developer had to do with the single-story limitation. In the original CUP approval from 2008. The mixed-use project is similar in intensity to surrounding development, and staff cannot identify any conflicts associated with approval of this request. Conditions of approval will limit the hours of operation and design of the office lots to ensure harmony with the remainder of the project and surrounding neighborhood. Cut-through traffic will be discouraged by the circuitous route of the service drive. The impact on the privacy of adjacent residents will be minimal, as only single-story structures are proposed. This will eliminate the potential for views from upper-level windows and balconies into adjacent property. And there's some other discussions on how that kind of ties into that office development. So we purchased our building in 2009. At that point in time, the CUP was what we looked to. Our developer went through with us. The intent was the assisted living facility was the anchor tenant. We had an office building that fronts on Overland Road. Future development was all going to be offices. It's kind of a rectangular parking structure on each side. There's 2 buildings on the west, 1 building on the east.
these proposed buildings kind of marry those, and it's perpendicular. So our concern with parking, yes, they have by code the amount of necessary spaces to park there, but we just are really concerned about overflow. One, our offices, we have customers coming and going. I have employees that work there. We're concerned, if the parking lot fills up with residents, guests, where are they going to go? The center driveway that's shown on the map is a fire lane, and the assisted living facility, based on the nature of their occupants, we have more visits from fire and paramedics than probably most folks do. So as our concern, if parking lot's full, you got overflow parking, are people going to park in the fire lane? We're going to have life safety issues. Additionally, there's no amenities proposed for these apartment units, no open space where the kids are going to play. I mean, you're limited to outdoor balconies. We're concerned we're going to have kids in the parking lot, kids in the driveway. There's just nowhere to go for them. We talked to the developer about potentially scaling back duplex, triplex, still understanding the need for infill housing and what the city is looking for. But as it's proposed, the total number of units and total number of bedrooms, we just don't feel fits with the way the development's laid out. And we would like to have that limited. No 2-story, no 3-story, go back with the original intent of the CUP was to limit that to single story. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hellman. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on this item tonight? Yeah, if others would like to speak, please come up, maybe sit in this front row here so that we're a little bit more queued up to speak.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, my name is Chuck Boson, and address is 815 South Bridgeway Place. That's in Eagle. And I am the regional vice president for Edgewood Healthcare. We operate the assisted living that's located immediately adjacent to those parcels. And I support the operations here in Idaho and specifically this parcel. And I'll be honest, I'm not a public speaker. I'm not an expert in planning and zoning. But I do know senior healthcare, and I do have a pretty good idea of the negative impact that putting residential family units directly in front of our assisted living would have. There's a number of reasons. I'll just try to highlight a couple real quickly. One, as mentioned, the CUP 08-0010 back in 2008. That would have a negative impact on all of the other property owners, as Mike alluded to earlier. Reducing the distance in the setback, specifically, the one parcel is immediately adjacent to our patio apartments. And so pushing that back, you've essentially got patio to patio, which would have a tremendous negative impact on the residents that currently live in those apartments and any future residents that would live there. As mentioned, all the other existing buildings are limited to a single story, including the assisted living. Essentially, if you look at the plot of land and you try to put 2- and 3-story multifamily units right in the middle of this intended business park, would eliminate all of the free space. It would eliminate green space. It would eliminate the opportunity to for the residents that currently live there to enjoy their current space, including the privacy issues from higher levels to safety issues with additional traffic running through there. The other thing, and Mike mentioned this, is the driveway that goes around our assisted living to the east side and around the back. This is really a service road, and it does lead into the adjacent neighborhood. Overland Street is so busy, it's impossible during most of the hours during the day to pull out from the egress there. And so the traffic tends to go around our assisted living facility into the neighborhood over to a controlled intersection at 5 Mile and Overland. And again, adding additional traffic, it's already difficult right now, and adding 11 more units would tremendously impact that. I thank you for your time, and
And I hope that the commission will choose to reject this proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Bozen. Please start with your name and address.
Gary Weaver, 10139 West Overland. I'm the executive director at Edgewood. And so my job is to help protect and keep the safety of our residents to the level that we have been assigned by the state. And so as I talked to my residents about this, their first look was, who's crazy enough to do that on these small little pieces of parcels that are there? And so my concern for them is that there's no control over where people move once they get there. And we have walkways around our community that our residents use for exercise and walking. And my suspect is that that'll also be used by families and kids that are now just outgoing and not doing really anything other than moving around and may not have parental supervision at the time. So that's a concern to me and to my residents. We are all for adding and being. We would love to have some of those areas cleaned up. And so a nice office complex would be a great addition to that because it gives us the same time frame that everything else is and makes it coherent with whatever else is in there at this time. Understand there are residentials around us, but there is a pretty big fence and border around that. So it makes it pretty safe for my residents. And we really try to keep it that way. Again, we're all for improvements and growth, but this just doesn't make sense in this little spot where we're at. So thank you for your time and your consideration, and hopefully you vote negative on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, if you're online and would like to testify on this item, please virtually raise your hand and we'll move to you next when we're finished with the people here in person. Please go ahead. You'll have 3 minutes. Please start with your name and address.
Cherry Moore. I reside at 22033 Eel Lane in Middleton. We own the two buildings, 10101 West Overland and 10173 West Overland, which is adjacent to Mr. Hillman's business. And we purchased those with the intent, and they've already touched on the CUP that was agreed upon in 2008. That there was going to be a cohesive business complex there. There's a couple of things that are of concern, which the other three participants have touched on. And of course, that is the safety of staff, the children, residents, as well as I'm concerned for my tenants about the noise. We won't have any control over what those folks that live there, the noise level. We have 3 tenants in the one building, 1 tenant in the other building, and there's constant flow of traffic throughout the day. And that parking lot is full in the morning with staff and with tenants. We submitted several concerns from my tenants, and they have indicated to me their lease comes up for renewal in August, and they have let me know that if this gets approved and that multifamily gets built, they will not renew their lease. So there is a significant impact to the value of those buildings, to Edgewood, and to to Mike's business as well. The other item that I'm somewhat concerned about is in the staff report, it talks about trash, and there's no place for trash enclosure, and they can't use our trash enclosure that is would be north of the multifamily. So I'm not sure what they have planned, but that might be something that needs to be addressed. As well as if there's pets, there's no place to go. So guess where they're going to go? They're probably going to end up in our parking lot. So we strongly we strongly encourage you to vote no on this application. We have no problem with adhering to the original CUP and the intent, which was to have a viable business community in that complex. And it's much more conducive to that than having 11 units smack in the middle of a nice business development. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So again, if there's anybody else that is here to speak on this item, if you wouldn't mind just moving up to the front so we can transition a little bit more quickly. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Betty Berman Solo. I live at 1970 Cananero Way in Boise, and I'm here on behalf of the Southwest Ada County Alliance. I hope that the commission has a ballpark view of this 0.43 acre parcel we're talking about, because that's really important to look at what is being projected at this point. The Southwest needs services. We need services, and this is a perfect location for additional office. It's a quiet office park. I have seen patients in that facility for years, and it has limited open space. And I'm going to address some of the things that haven't been addressed yet. The city has recommended for multifamily zoning to exist where less than a 10-minute walk to a public park is present. Well, this is more than that. It's 3 miles to Peppermint Park. So any multifamily would have to, they'd have to tolerate the traffic on Overland and walk closer to 20 minutes to get to that Peppermint Park. So that's not in keeping with what the city has recommended for multifamily zoning. And the conflict that I would see as a physical therapist in trying to do what I normally do with patients is take them forward and maybe even address going to get groceries would be tremendous when you add the conflict of 11 more units. You have a single-story office park that has existed there with a conditional use that said single story. And I think that's an obligation in some ways, especially as we're looking at infill. Sometimes you're just not going to retrofit every infill for certain types of residential. And this is certainly one that would not be compatible. A 3-story building, when everything around it is 2-story, is single story, and then single story going to a housing development to the west. The only 3-story is down the road on Overland in a cluster of 3 stories. So I think the commission has an obligation to look what is there and fulfill that obligation, as well as the safety issue that's going to be put upon residential if they end up living in a place where the children would have to spend time in the parking lot because there is no open space. And I think you get that when you look at the layout of the facility.
Thank you so much. That's the end of your time.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else in the chambers that would like to testify on this item? Okay, I don't see any hands raised online. If there's anybody online that would like to testify on this item, please virtually raise your hand. I'm going to just cross-check some of my names to some of the folks here. Ann Fisher, you had signed up in advance, but I don't see a hand raised. So perhaps what you were going to say has been said. Okay. Well, seeing no more public testimony interest, we will close that portion of the hearing and the item, and we'll move back to an applicant's rebuttal.
Thank you. for the time and the sake of time, I know this has been there's been a lot of people that have spoke. There was a lot of things that were touched on. They were all items that I knew were going to be touched on. So I will just leave it open to questions and a discussion if that's the best way to go about all of these and to discuss these items.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Delgado. With that, we'll close the public portion of the hearing. The item is now before the commission.
Madam Chairman,
Commissioner Gillespie.
permission to offer a preamble to our deliberation,
Permission.
and essentially to not make a motion.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
So look, I've heard about 20 of these. This happens all the time now, where we have too much property designed, zoned, conditioned to be commercial office, light office, and there's no demand for it. So I've heard 20 of these kinds of projects where 20 years ago, we thought it was going to be light office and they can't sell it. Like the people who own this land they'd love to put light office there. They can't find someone to do it. So now we have a situation where we have booming residential demand and very little demand for this kind of property to be commercial, right? And so that's the dilemma we face, is how do we respond to that simple fact? Because some of the people who testified tonight basically like this being open space, and they know pretty well it's going to be pretty tough to find some nice doctor to move in there and build, a little office. It's not, this happens all the time. So as we think about it, I'm inclined to try and approve the use, but with appropriate conditions of the PUD. So that's where I'd like to see us go. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Finfrock.
I'd just like to maybe comment on that. So I kind of agree with Commissioner Gillespie, but so when I read the standard of that zone, it says, and I've read it earlier, but basically the development shall be of a scale and character similar to a nearby residential development. I'm not sure the residential development is the assisted living facility. And maybe you can comment with your experience, but I just would like to keep it per code and similar to that scale of the surrounding residential units or developments.
Madam Chairman.
Commissioner Gillespie, I'm going to just say, I guess if we're getting towards conditioning,
So why don't I give
we should make a motion. Yeah, go ahead,
Okay,
Commissioner.
I'll
Gillespie.
try, and
Yes.
we may have to amend this and get, so I want to move that we approve PUD 21-66, but limit the height of the buildings to 2 stories and restore the CUP-driven setbacks. And if we have to ask the applicant to defer to come back with a redesign, I'm also okay with that. But for the time being, I'll just make a motion to approve PUD 21-66 with the 2008 CUP setbacks and restricting the height of the buildings to 2 stories, which I believe is compatible with the area.
Second.
And if we need to convert stories into feet, we can, to a distance measure, we can do that.
Okay, thank you for the second, Commissioner Finfrock. Is there further discussion on this?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Moore.
So I'm actually not in support of the motion. And really, it's just looking at the R1B, so the maximum building height in R1B, which is the adjacent zone that's residential zone to the east, is 35 feet. That 2-story building, the peak height is under 29 feet. In my mind, it's compatible with something that could be built in that R1B. For the west side, that's adjacent to the LO. The maximum building height in that zone is 45 feet. Well, that 3-story building adjacent, it's only the one apartment. That 3-story building adjacent is under 36 feet. So already that building is compatible with its adjacent zone as well. So I think with those two, in terms of limiting the height, that's kind of why I'm a little bit hesitant for that condition. For the setbacks, I think because the underlying zone does allow for that 10 feet, I'm comfortable with that. I know the R1B, and I don't have that standard up in front of me. The R1B, if that zone is 15 feet, then I might be a little bit more amenable to that side, just because that makes it compatible with that R1B. But in terms of that, and then for the use itself, if I'm looking at the modifications to the conditions for the original CUP, I don't see any mention of the residential use itself. It's all dimensional.
No.
It's single story, and then it's those setbacks. So I don't have a problem with the use because it doesn't seem to be restricted even with that initial CUP. So, but it's really those heights. It appears to me personally to be compatible with the surroundings.
Thank you, Commissioner Moore.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Blanchard.
I
Whose birthday
agree
it is.
with Commissioner Moore in that if the argument here is that there's no market for the office property, so then we're justified in doing something, I would argue there's no market for a two-story building and we're going to be sitting here with the same thing. So that's why I think the comments about the adjacent uses and what the proposed heights could be in there really are a deciding factor. I just don't, I know what I would do if I were the developer. I would just say, okay, well, forget it then and throw up my hands because we just can't monetize it to a two-story building here. So I think we're just left in the same position if we limit the height to that.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman,
Commissioner Gillespie.
can I ask the people who just spoke, I think there's the three, or
Two have spoken so
maybe,
far.
how they feel about the setbacks and do they want to conform to the CUP setbacks from 2008 or the slightly smaller, 33% smaller NOD setbacks that are just allowed by the code?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Mooney.
I'm comfortable with the underlying code setbacks. I'm in agreement with Commissioner Moore on the compatibility discussion.
Madam Chairman.
Commissioner Gillespie.
In the interest of speed and brevity, I asked the seconder to join me in withdrawing our motion and allowing the other side of the table to come forward.
I second.
Okay.
Second the withdrawal.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner
You all
Finfrock.
right,
So
Ty?
Commissioner Gillespie and Commissioner Finfrock have withdrawn their motion. So we are open to a motion on the table.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Moore.
I should have had that up already. I move that we approve PUD 21-66 with all the terms and conditions in the staff report.
Second.
Great. We have a second, a motion by Commissioner Moore and a second by Commissioner Squires. Is there a discussion?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Moore.
Just mainly just a note, appreciate I think there's probably a misunderstanding with the intent of this CUP that it was an office park where residential was actually allowed. Maybe that's something with the wording of the daycare. But I think it feels compatible to me to the adjacent properties. It's a residential use similar to kind of the assisted living behind, and then similar to that kind of eastern side, and appreciate Commissioner Gillespie's kind of starting off with the conditions and those comments.
Commissioner Squires.
Madam Chair, thank you. I agree. I think Commissioner Moore said it great the first go round. I'll just say, the height is allowed. This is infill. Open space is defined per the PUD ordinance is met per code. It meets and exceeds the parking requirements. There is a buffer along the eastern border as well that has a significant tree line. I don't know what the height of those trees are, but they're big. And I think that that is a great buffer for the residential. I'm also of the belief that residential is compatible with residential, period. I just think this is a good use of infill, and I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Finfrock.
I won't be supporting the motion, and I just, back to what I originally said, I think the code is clear that the scale and the character have to be similar to the residential developments nearby, and I don't think 35 feet is similar, so I won't be supporting the motion.
Okay, seeing if there is no further discussion, will the clerk please call the vote?
Stead.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'm going to just clarify too. We now have a motion on the table to approve PUD 21-66 at 10145 West Overland Road as written in the staff report with all the terms and conditions as outlined. So sorry. Yes, please call the vote. Stead, yes.
Squires.
Aye.
Blanchard.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Lesby.
No.
Finbrock.
No.
Ganley.
Aye.
Mooney.
Aye.
6 in favor, 2 opposed. The motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 10. This is PUD 22-10 and CVA 22-14 for EV Studio at 4210 West Emerald Street. This is conditional use permit for planned mixed use development comprised of 21 multifamily units and a ground floor commercial space. We'll please start with staff.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the commission. The item before you is PUD 22-10 and CVA 22-14. This is a conditional use permit for planned mixed-use development comprised of 21 multifamily units and ground floor commercial space on 0.59 acres located at 4210 West Emerald Street in an R3D zone. Subject property is surrounded by a mixture of uses such as offices, single and multifamily residential, personal service uses, and a cemetery. The property is adjacent to the Emerald bus line with the closest bus stop under 100 feet away. The property is also approximately a half a mile east of the Orchard and Emerald Neighborhood Activity Center. The applicant is proposing 2 buildings with 3 live-work units on the corner and 18 multifamily units on the east side of the parcel. The applicant plans to meet all setbacks and height requirements aside from a variance to the parking setback on the rear property line. The applicant is requesting to encroach 10 feet into the rear setback in order to maintain the existing parking and access point to the site off of Wilson. While normally this would not be considered a hardship or exceptional circumstance, the applicant is closing the access point off Emerald Street, and ACHD does not want the applicant to relocate the existing access point any closer to the intersection of Wilson and Emerald. Excuse me. Additionally, the fire department requires a 20-foot drive or 26-foot drive aisle for aerial access instead of the normal 22-foot drive aisle. The applicant also meets the requirements for a 20% parking reduction due to transit access and a vertical mixed use of developments. In conclusion, the planning team recommends approval of PUD 22-10 and CVA 22-14 with conditions, and I will stand for questions.
Thank you. Next, we'll move to hear from the applicant. Please start with your name and address. You'll have 3 minutes. I'm sorry, you'll have up to 10 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm Amanda Bidwell with EV Studio 725 East 2nd Street in Meridian, Idaho. So what you have before you tonight is the GEM. It's a development I've been working on with Tanner and Brady, who are here tonight. If you want to go to the next slide. As mentioned, this is on the corner of Emerald and Wilson. It's on the transit corridor. You want to go to the next slide. This is our site plan. So it's a total of 0.644 acres. We are proposing 2 separate buildings. In the southwest corner is a live work building that would have 3 units, ground floor commercial with 2 stories of living space above. And then on the east side of the property, there's an apartment complex, or an apartment building with 18 total units and some tuck under parking. The dash line that you see there outlines where the building is above. So those parking stalls on the far east are actually underneath the building. We are proposing a fully enclosed secured bike parking within the apartment building for those residents as well. And then each unit has private balconies, and we are close to several parks for open space requirements. Landscape plan, you can see on the north side there, we are proposing some pretty dense landscaping. That is to help with the parking being a little bit closer than is normally allowed by code, and is an argument in favor of our variance there. Next slide. Just briefly looking at the buildings themselves, this is the apartment building, 1st and 2nd floor. So you can see it kind of steps back away from the property line to help with height, and has the tuck under parking there on the 1st floor.
The third and fourth floors are the same units. They're all 2-story. So on the third floor, you see the hallway connecting those 8 units, and then the fourth floor is the second floor for those units. The live workspace, you can see there the ground floor commercial, and then there's 2-story units above each commercial space. These are the building elevations, gives you an idea of what we're looking at here. It does fit in with a recently approved building directly to the east, similar style there. Next slide. Just some more of the elevations of the apartment. That west elevation faces the parking lot and the east elevation faces the building adjacent. Next slide. This is the live work unit. So that south side is what you would see along Emerald, and then the north side faces the parking. And then the east side facing Wilson, we would have spot for signage and addressing, and on the east side, it faces the apartment across the parking. So we do fit in with a number of the Blueprint Boise plans. We're providing a mix of housing and density where it's needed along a busy corridor. Tanner's been great about finding artists to help provide some artwork to fit in with the buildings as well. And because we are on the existing transit corridor, we're helping to reduce vehicle miles, and then providing the commercial there with the live work as well helps to reduce number of trips needed. This is in the central bench. The land use map indicates the need for high density neighborhoods here, and as well as a mix of housing types there, which is what we're providing with the apartments and then the live work spaces. Our variance request is to maintain the existing parking location. As Jesse said, we are dealing with ACHD. We've been required to close our access off of Emerald. As it stands, the existing access point is closer to the intersection there than is allowed by code by ACHD. So that is the main reason for our request to the variance. Additionally, we are adding that landscaping there. This is the existing location of the parking, and there's an existing fence there. So we're just helping buffer some of the headlights and stuff from the adjacent neighborhood. These were the conditions of approval, and we're in full agreement with those. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Before we go to questions, I'll quickly ask if we have a representative from the Central Rim Neighborhood Association. Okay, seeing none, then we will move on to questions from the commission.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Blanchard.
Just a quick question for the applicant, actually. And can we go back to the presentation? Is that possible? I think the one right before this.
The staff presentation?
One before that. Okay, that's perfect. Amanda, where the compact parking spaces there are facing Emerald, is it contiguous across? What do we have there from the corner of the apartment building?
Yeah, and I can't move the mouse myself to show you the line of where the building is. You can kind of see the building would actually stop at the edge of those compact stalls, so those would not be covered. That's to provide fire separation between the two buildings there.
Gotcha. Okay, good enough. I promise Commissioner Squires I'd keep it short.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Mooney.
Could I get this last staff slide? And I got a question for the applicant. So the friction in your design discussions as you started this was right there, correct? It was either ask for a variance from the city or quote unquote a variance from ACHD. Was there any collaboration between staffs on that, or did ACHD just say close the Emerald Street entrance?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Mooney, my understanding is that the city requested Emerald to be closed and the ACHD was agreeing with that.
So we're as the city, we're basically putting as one of the opposition neighbors said, where the neighbors to the north will bear the brunt of the impact versus traffic on Emerald will bear the brunt of the impact is kind of where we are. Is that might being too simplistic for the staff?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Mooney, I think that the The closure on Emerald was essentially because it is a very busy street and that is an intersection close, or that access point is close to the intersection. Plus they also had the option of taking access from the less busy street, which is what we typically like to see.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Mooney.
So the current driveway, the current access, I mean, what's the differential between current use and projected use? For, I don't know, for either one of you. I mean, you see where I'm driving with this is I hate for ACHD to drive land use decisions in this case. I mean, if as a planner, would you have been able to develop a quality product with Emerald Street access? Would it have been better or worse?
Commissioner, or sorry, Madam Chair, Commissioner Mooney, that's hard to say on the spot. I was designing kind of with these parameters. I do think if we were able to take that out to Emerald, there it would have been probably a better site design in the end.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I think just to clarify, I think it was the city's request to close.
I understand that, but you see the point I'm making.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Quick one, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Danley.
This is just mostly to staff. So I'm reading through the letter that was submitted for our Parks Department. And it basically says, BPR does not find a detailed tree mitigation plan has been submitted with the application documents. I didn't see anything in there, nor did I see any late correspondence that specifically looked at this. And so it looks to me like the existing property has a lot of pretty large, mature, bigger canopy trees. And it looks to me like they're all going to go away. And it tells me that there isn't necessarily a specific mitigation plan in sight, but that there are proposals for trees to go back in. But basically it's like an incomplete is what I'm getting at. So is there something I'm missing? I just want to make sure I'm not missing that.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Danley, essentially the applicant would have to comply with the parks request to submit a tree mitigation plan.
Did I miss that? And as a term and condition of approval? Is that in there? Maybe I missed that.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Danley, any of the comments received by commenting agencies, it goes under the conditions.
Okay.
So it wasn't outlined, I don't think specifically, but it is in there as a parks condition.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions. Is there anybody that would like to testify on this item? Please come right on up.
Hi, my name's Kevin Jones. I live at live and reside at 804 North Roosevelt Street. So it's on the northeast corner of Roosevelt and Emerald, just about a quarter mile at most from this property. Madam Chair, Commission, I'm opposed to this just because Commissioner Gillespie had said on the last PUD, the tax or the commercial rolls are down right now. So obviously this is number 21 that you guys have heard. We don't need more commercial. I mean, we have a lot of vacant commercial. We have a lot of vacant commercial around this area. So that's kind of a concern to me. There's a lot of residential in this area. There's tattoo places that are down the road that are open till 10 o'clock. There's massage places that are open 24 hours a day. The other issue is parking with this area, because most of the parking, it's a very small parking lot in relation to having 4 stories. A lot of the parking on Wilson is already taken up by homeowners. So I can see that being a concern. And since they're developing a building on the corner of Emerald and Roosevelt, all that parking is going to be taken up now, as there's not a lot of room to park. They talk about transportation with being able to go out to Meridian. Well, ACHD's closed off the road the foot and bike path across the Emerald Street Bridge at I-84. So you can't even walk to the mall anymore or bike to the mall anymore if you want to stay on Emerald. So that connectivity is going away. The 4-story on both sides on the north and south sides of this, it's all single family dwellings. You guys have to make a decision if you want to move downtown Boise onto the bench. You know, I'm versed in Title 50 in Idaho code, and I know property rights and all that other good stuff. But you know, it just kind of concerns me with this development that they're just packing so much into about a acre and a half block. And there's nothing else like that around there. And I know it's zoned R3D, but it's a very small section of R3D. And the commercial that's even farther down the road doesn't have this high of a density. So, you know, I think it takes away from a lot of what's going on and around this area. Yeah, that's all that I have. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Kevin. Is there anybody else that would like to testify on this item? Please come on up or virtually raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, then we would ask for rebuttal. You can have up to 5 minutes. Please just state your name again for the record.
Sure. Amanda Bidwell here with EV Studio. I understand that parking is always a concern on these new developments. We are required to have 28 stalls and we are showing 30 right now. So we're doing our best to get as many on the site as possible to help mitigate that. As far as height and density go, we are kind of fitting in with some of the surrounding developments that have been recently approved as well. And also to just comment again on Commissioner Blanchard's point, or I'm sorry, Mooney's point. While having an access point onto Emerald would have been beneficial, I do agree with the city's recommendation to close it because it is a very busy road right next to several intersections there. So,
thank you, Amanda. Great. With that, the public hearing is closed and the item is before the commission.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Blanchard.
I move that we approve PUD 22-10 and CVA 22-14 for EV Studio with all the terms and conditions in the staff report.
Second.
Great. Second from Commissioner Danley. Is there any discussion?
I appreciate the members of the commission hearing this. I was the one that requested to hear this, and I'm glad that Ms. Bidwell's able to walk us through that and clear up some of my confusion on it. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Blanchard. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, will the clerk please call the vote?
Ed,
Aye.
Squires. Aye. Blanchard.
Aye.
Moore. Aye. Gillespie.
Aye.
Finfrock.
Aye.
Danley.
Aye.
Mooney.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay, well, let's take a 5-minute break and we'll come back at about 8:17. I'll start off here with item number 11. This is CFH 21-132 for David Baker, Chris Fuentes, and Lars Anderson at 431 North Morningside Way, an appeal of the planning director's approval of a Category 2 Hillside and Foothills development permit.
Madam Chairman.
Commissioner Gillespie.
Madam Chairman, as I live just down the street and live in this neighborhood, and as I serve on the HOA up on Morningside Way, I'll respectfully recuse myself from this as I'm not sure I can be completely impartial.
Thank you. Okay. So with that, we will start with staff.
Great. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Before you is an appeal of the planning director's approval of a hillside permit for the grading associated with the residential single-family home. The project site is 0.5 acres located at 431 North Morningside Way in an R1B zone. This property is lot 109, block 1 of the Morningside Heights subdivision number 2 and was platted as a buildable lot. On February 22nd, 2022, the planning director approved a Category 2 Hillside and Foothills development permit for a new single-family dwelling. And on March 4th, 2022, an appeal was received and filed by the respective neighbors. The appeal points are summarized on your screen, but in general, these concerns are in regards to a spring on site, concerns with the discharge, contamination, drainage, and possible downhill effects of the spring disruption. Staff, as well as Public Works city engineers, have reviewed all of these concerns and found that all issues have been addressed and conditioned in the original Hillside approval. In conclusion, staff recommends denial of the appeal and upholding the planning director's approval. I'm available for any questions and will note that we also have Kane Schaefer and Jason Taylor from Public Works available online to answer any questions as well.
Thank you, Ms. Garlick. Okay, let's move first to the appellant. To the applicant, and then we'll hear from the appellants. Is the applicant present?
Should be online. Maybe Mike or Steve.
Steve or Mike. Here we go. Hi, Mike. Are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Please start with your name and address, and you'll have up to 10 minutes.
Okay. Madam Chair, members of the commission, my name is Mike Stock. I'm with Berlin Development, the builder of the property. My residence is 487 North Morningside, which is just to the lower west of the 431 Morningside lot that we're discussing. As the builder, we understand the requirements and the conditions that need to be met, and we will. And as a resident just to the west and lower than that lot, we understand, the items going on and are not concerned because we know they will be taken care of in the proper means and methods of the construction. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Next, we'll hear from the appellants. This is going to be Chris or Lars or David. Please start with your name and address. You'll have up to 10 minutes.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, my name is Dave Backer.
Go ahead and pull this up so we catch it for the record. Thank you.
My name is Dave Backer. I live at 458 North Morningside Way, Boise, 83712. My lot is directly across the street from the subject property. My main concern is the disturbance of this spring. We've lived there for 12 years, have watched people try to cover it up, try to bury it, try to make it go away. It's always returned. If I understand the approvals, but by staff, but I would really worry if you would imagine what we're looking at. We're looking at an unknown volume of water maintained in a fractured sandstone vessel with no known inlet. We don't know where it's at. And we're going to watch a house being built, which is going to demand a grading, but actually grading in this case, as the property owner who just spoke, will demand chipping away at the standstill. This is not simply going in and dig. We will see two big backhoes in there with a chisel on them, grinding away very close to where this spring is. My concern is we have not been given any information on what mitigations, what plans for monitoring of, or what's going to happen to this spring. That's why we would request a delay in this approval until that information can be provided to us by a geotech engineer or a hydrologist. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Okay, next, I would ask to see if we have anybody present from the East End Neighborhood Association. Seeing none, then we will move to questions from the commission for staff, the applicant, or the appellant. Ma'am?
Yes.
Are you with the public?
I'm with the.
We will get to that after this process. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Squires.
this is for staff. Given Mr. Backer's concern, is there someone online that could maybe speak to his concerns and maybe explain to us as commissioners, what that next step looks like?
Yeah, I would, Madam Chair, Commissioner Squires, I'd point to either Kane Schaefer or Jason Taylor to maybe describe the process procedure following this Hillside approval.
Just give us a second while we promote them to speaking permissions online here. Jason, hi, are you there and can you take this for us?
Do you hear?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you.
Great. Please introduce yourself for the record and then please go ahead with the answering the question.
Good evening. It's Jason Taylor, City of Boise Public Works Engineering. I'm the Assistant City Engineer for our DIS group. And I supervise Kane with the Hillside reviews. Can you restate the question? I caught pieces of it.
Hi, thank you. I guess my question is just in relation to Mr. Backer's concerns about not having a known inlet and not understanding what the mitigation will be. I'm just hoping that maybe you can give us a little bit more explanation as to what we do know. And for those things that we don't know, what those next steps would be prior to any sort of building permit or occupancy permit being granted.
And this is specifically in relation to the questions regarding the spring,
Yes.
which I just wanted to clarify in case Jason had missed that part of it. Okay, please go ahead.
Yes. We definitely have some work to do on this lot. This isn't something new that the city has ran into before with springs popping up on lots. Pretty much the entire East End neighborhood has springs that pop up into the right of way, which one of these appeal letters did talk about the spring at Roanoke that ACHD had to fix this last year. Typically on a lot like this, if we have a spring, the spring is coming from the foothills and water is beautiful and it'll run through cracks in the rocks and it just springs up wherever. Now on the opposite side of this hill, where the city park is, used to be called Castle Rock, but now I forget what the name is, but there was a spring on that side that we mitigated years ago. So springs just happen. And for this lot to be approved, it's a buildable parcel. There are mitigation techniques that we have employed or engineers have employed by putting a full under drain system under the houses to capture any water that does come up on the lots. And then that system is typically tied into ACHD systems. The water's getting there anyhow. We're just going to give it more of a direct path. That's what happened at Roanoke. That's what happened all over the East End. I've been with the city for 10 years and I've probably been involved with a dozen or so of these types of construction projects. And they tend to work. There's some that you got to watch a little bit closer because of spring activity and how much water it is. This one with the spring not even reaching the road at times, the geotechs and myself are not terribly concerned with it. We're going to put the conditions of the under drain and we put the condition that they have to tie it into ACHD system with their approval. The only outlier is if ACHD says no. And then we're back to the drawing board of trying to figure out how to get rid of the water.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Any additional questions from the commission?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Moore.
So on packet page 883, and this is in the letter from Kane Schaefer, or I think it's the approval letter. It's condition number 5 under prior to approval of building permit or grading permit. It mentions a site suitability letter based on the most recent construction drawings and grading and drainage plans. What is included in that site suitability letter? Is that just based off the geotech?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Moore, I may let Kane Schaefer answer that question about the site suitability letter.
Kane, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, wonderful. Commissioner, Madam Chair and Commissioner Moore, in regards to a site suitability letter, it is required per our Hillside technical manual that oversees residential development in the foothills. And what that is asking is a site suitability letter from the geotechnical engineer after they have reviewed the most recent construction drawings and grading plan that would show the subfloor drainage, and it would be their approval that the planned construction project meets their recommendations and their requirements in their geotechnical report.
Right, thank you.
Okay. I'm seeing, Commissioner Mooney.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
On the page 814, I think, was it 813, the page you were just on, Commissioner Moore?
It was 883.
Oh, okay. On condition number, or the answer to 7, which was a concern with groundwater seeping down to their lot after disruption of the spring, page 814, number 7. Could we change, or is it appropriate in an appeal discussion to change the verbiage in that paragraph, or the city's response? Because we're pretty clear saying it will not find an alternate path, which that's pretty definitive. I'm uncomfortable with that strong of language when some of the engineering hasn't been done yet.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner Mooney, that language is part of the staff report. It's not technically a condition to be, or maybe it's up for debate to be modified. And I know in putting together this report, it was kind of a team effort here with Public Works. So if, Kane or Jason want to speak to the response to appeal point number 7, where we talk about where we don't believe the spring will have downgrade effects. I think Commissioner Mooney, you're pointing out that's pretty definitive, and maybe if we could speak to that would be helpful.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Mooney, you are correct. Water is going to follow the path of least resistance, and with a subfloor drainage system under the entire residence, that will be designed by the engineers and the geotechnical engineers. That spring, wherever it is popping up on the site, will follow that path of least resistance through the drain rock and into ultimately, once they get, if they do get ACHD approval, into these right-of-way drainage system. So you are correct. With the engineering, it is apparent that it will follow the subdrain forge and it will not find an alternate path.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no more questions, then we will move on to public testimony. If you're online and would like to testify on this item, please raise your hand. And if you are in the chambers and would like to testify on this item, please come up to the podium. Please start with your name and address. You'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Chris Fuentes. I live across the street at 484 North Morningside Way in Boise. One of my concerns is the issue with the water getting into the ACHD drainage system that I understand it's not been made clear to us exactly how that's going to happen. So we had an email from one of the city engineers saying one of the possibilities would be just to let it run across the sidewalk and into the storm drains, which I think is sort of what we have over on Roanoke. And during the winter, that's really hazardous. It turns into a sheet of ice, and that street is where a lot of people walk in our neighborhood and other neighborhoods, walk their dogs. And so my concern is that we haven't, that's not been made clear to us how that water is going to get off their property and into the storm drains and not impact our neighborhood. So that seems to be an open question at this point. And I understand they're just going to be allowed to go ahead and start digging without us having clarification as to what's going to happen to that water, as it goes off their property and, onto the street or wherever. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fuentes. Do we have anybody else that would like to testify on this item? Please start with your name and address. You'll have 3 minutes.
Yes, it's Betsy Clenny, Klene, and I'm at 2279 East Solitude Court, which is past, if on the first map, it's past these construction lots and the cul-de-sac above. So some engineers did come out. I don't know who they were, and they, I guess, were surveying, and they put holes in this lot and on neighbors' lots about this big. And I happened to be home that day. The water was just gushing. It's not a little stream. It was just pouring out, and immediately. And it's not underground. The dirt is about this thick. You could see the water, and there was, I don't know how many holes, at least over 6. And so that was concerning. And again, nobody knows how the water is going to be directed. If something happens to that road and the water's gushing out, I'll be stuck up there. There's 13 houses up there, and it'll be icy. We have no way out. It's a hazard for us. That's why I'm concerned. And who's going to pay for all this? Is that the builder? And how much will it cost? We don't know any of that. We don't know what. I think we should have a right to know exactly what's going to be done before it's approved. It's liability for everybody if it's not. These are serious issues. That's all.
Thank you. Okay, do we have anybody else? It does not look like it. So with that, we'll close the public portion. Oh no, we're going to move back to rebuttal from the applicant. If you'd like to take those 5 minutes. Mr. Stock, are you there?
Yes, I am.
So we'll start with the applicant in rebuttal, and then we'll go to the appellant for the rebuttal.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Again, agree as stated previously. We understand the concerns. We have the geotech completely involved, the civil engineer group, and the public works and Hillside involved in this. And as noted in the concerns, we have spoken with ACHD, we have revised or made the design more clear and have section details that show how all those systems are going to work and where they tie in and how they discharge. Those have been addressed after the February 22nd date, noting that that's not part of the discussion to date. Those things have been addressed and have been resubmitted back into the city or the Hillside for review and further approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so next we'll move to the appellant for a rebuttal. Thank you, Mr. Backer. Please just state your name again for the record when you start.
Dave Backer.
Thank you.
I'd like to address the city engineer's concerns because so far what I've heard today is addressing everything to the house. The house is not our concern. Our concern is what is going to happen when the spring is disturbed to our properties, which are all downgrade. I understand, yeah, trench drains in the house, going to take away that water. What if that water doesn't go towards the house? What if that water goes down the hill towards the street? There's almost 20 foot of elevation difference between where that spring is and where that street is. Water will go downhill. That's my worry. I talked to the city staff and that's what they expressed. We protecting the house. We would like the same protection for our homes, which have been there for a considerable amount of time. All we're asking is a delay. Let's find out, let's see the geotech report. Let's see what that letter says. Let's get those things in before we let them start pounding away at this piece of property. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, with that, we'll close the public portion of the hearing and the item is now before the commission.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Moore.
I move that we deny the appeal of CFH 21-132 for the reasons stated in the staff report. Worded that correctly.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Squires. Commissioner Moore, would you like to start the discussion?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think that the appellant's rebuttal was exactly the reasons why I moved to deny it. So based on my understanding is there's a desire for details to be worked out prior to approval of building permit. And that's exactly what this kind of recommended conditions of approval of their Foothills permit includes. It's conditions to get a building permit, they're required to provide those details. They're required to provide that site suitability letter. They're required to provide a lot more detail. And I do think it actually does meet the intent of the concerns here. So, and for those reasons, I think that the two are in alignment, even if maybe there's a misunderstanding.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, will the clerk, so we have a motion on the table to deny the appeal. This is item number 11, CFH 21-132 at 431 North Morningside Way. Will the clerk please call the vote?
Stead.
Aye.
Squires.
Aye.
Blanchard.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Finfrock.
Aye.
Stanley.
Aye.
Mooney.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay, as soon as we get our Commissioner Gillespie back, then we'll get started again. Good timing, sir. Okay, so we are moving on to item number 12. This is our last item of the night, CUP 22-7 for Rodney Evans and Partners PLLC at 1604 South Philippi Street, conditional use permit for a group home on 0.3 acres located in an LOD zone. Go ahead, Ms. Garlick.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the commission. Before you is a request for a conditional use permit. The project site is 0.3 acres located in the LOD zone at 1604 South Philippi Street. The site is currently developed with a vacant commercial office building, which was originally constructed as a single family home in 1954 and converted into office in the 1990s. The property is situated at the southeast intersection of West Overland Road and South Philippi Street, with Valley Regional Transit bus route running adjacent to the site and a bus stop located directly west. There's a mix of uses in the general neighborhood, which include residential, commercial, and recreation. Less than a quarter mile to the east is a community activity center at Overland and Orchard, with the Hillcrest Shopping Center just north of the site. The proposed project includes renovating the interior existing building to convert into a residential group home containing 8 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a laundry room, and shared living with shared kitchen facilities. Minor exterior improvements are proposed with the structure remaining largely unchanged. The standards of the proposed structure and on-site parking meet and exceed all setbacks and development standards of the LOD zone. As proposed, the use is not more intensive than what is allowed or conditionally allowed in the LOD zone. The element of the proposed project that triggers the need for this conditional use permit is the conversion from office to residential. The proposed use is compatible to the uses in the general neighborhood and is large enough to accommodate the proposed use with all the dimensional and development standards being met. The proposed project complies with the comprehensive plan because it is located at an intersection of a major transit corridor adjacent to public transit and near community activity center, which is within walking and biking distance to employment, education, amenities, and services. Public comments were received during the review period as well as late correspondence. These concerns were expressed regarding the location, incompatibility of the use, concerns with safety. Additionally, there was a request to defer this item in order for the neighbors to get more time to get feedback from Idaho Power and a previous tenant of the home. Staff found that this project is compatible with the comprehensive plan and meets all the required findings for the CUP. Staff recommends approval and the motion needed as a final action. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Garlick. Great. Next, we'll hear from the applicant. Please start with your name and address, and you'll have up to 10 minutes.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, Ben Semple with Rodney Evans and Partners, 1450 West Bannock Street, Boise, Idaho, 83702. First off, we are in agreement with all the terms and conditions of the staff report. And I want to thank Delaney. She also fielded a lot of emails as late correspondence that couldn't be included in the packet. Most were from residents of other homes that this owner operates right now for a very similar use. So this is a CUP for the change of use from commercial office to residential use. This is for a transitional home. This is for 8 bedrooms that are completed or to be created within the current space. The transitional home is for those that are completed with their sentences and are being released to start the transition back into our community. This is a very underserved and a very marginalized portion of our community. In discussions with some of the other overseeing jurisdictions, there are currently a number of people that the option for them when there's not a transitional home available to live in is they remain in prison, even if their sentence is fulfilled. The other option for them, if they are let out, is homelessness. My client and the owner, he runs multiple homes. This is not a facility. This has 1 resident per room. There are other group homes, which also include services inside of them. This is not one of those. They also have 2 to 3 people per room. This again is for 1 resident per room, which exceeds the standards that are set typically by the state and even the federal government that oversees this. Let's see, the home here has a very long list of rules governing what the residents can and can't do, including a 0 tolerance policy for any rules that are broken. Let's see, Idaho Power, that's probably the main issue that is being brought up. Idaho Power's previous lawsuits with a previous owner of this property don't have any bearing on this project. It's a civil matter that I can find nothing in any record that has a deed restriction on this that keeps it from being a residential use, nor is the zoning set up to prohibit a residential use. The only thing that we have to do is go through a conditional use permit for this. We do believe that this project provides for a very necessary and vital service, again, for a very marginalized and underserved segment of our community. I do have the owner here with me that was going to speak to a little bit of it. And again, I just want to point out that this is not a facility. This is essentially a multifamily home that allows for the rental of individual rooms. For people that are trying to get back into our society, they need an address to get a job. They need a driver's license to get a job. If you don't have an address, you can't typically get a driver's license. There's no additional options beyond this type of housing for them. So with that, I'm going to cede the rest of my time to Joe Howell, the owner of Joe's House, and then we'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Simple.
Thank you.
Joe, please start with your name and address for the record, and you'll have the rest of the time here.
Hi, my name's Joe Howell. I own Joe's House. My address is 5605 West Franklin Road in Boise, zip code 83705. I guess just to expand upon what Ben said, I do offer transitional housing for people coming out of facilities. And it is single room where traditionally they put 2 or 3 or 4 people per room. I rent out individual rooms because I believe in recovery. It's important to have your own space and have a little bit of dignity in where you live, a little pride in where you live. Because I think that you can't be successful sharing a bedroom with 2 or 3 other grown men. All of my clients are on either probation or parole with the state or United States probation. They're subject to drug testing and supervision with their supervising officers, as well as myself. And I have one employee that was a 25-year corrections employee. And he goes around and he does a lot of my drug testing, and a lot of our work is, working with these people to help them find jobs and get back into life. Because at the end of the day, 95% of the people that go to prison are going to end up in our communities. Just depends on what you want them armed with, success or failure. That's all I have to say.
Thank you,
Any
Mr.
questions?
Thank you, Mr. Howell. We will get to questions. Just hang tight. Before that, I'm going to just check to see if we have a representative from the Hillcrest Neighborhood Association present. Okay, seeing none, we will go to questions then from the commission for staff of the applicant.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Danley.
I have got 2 questions, and one is most definitely for the applicant. One might be for either. For the first one, this is to the applicant. House rule number 12 has to do with electronic, basically plug-in types of cars and that sort of thing. And so I'm curious, basically it says they're not permitted on the property. And so I'm curious, in this day and age when we have e-cars, e-bikes, e-scooters, what the thought process is that in that with respect to trying to get around.
Well, so my thought process on it is I keep my rents really low and I pay for all the utilities in my residences. And my rents are only $550 a month per room. And if every individual had an electric vehicle that they plugged in, it wouldn't be cost effective for me to continue keeping my rents as low as they are and serving the population that I do.
Okay, fair. And it's a private matter. It was more of a question. Here's my other question. We do know we've had several folks who wrote in with respect to, I believe it's some sort of a school daycare, whatever the case may be, across the street. Can you walk us through with respect to sex offender lists and all of that, which was one of the concerns that was raised? It sounds to me you rent privately, so therefore you have the discretion as well as some sort of a registry, I'm sure, that has to be gone through. Can you kind of walk us through just to address that issue, please?
Yes, I don't currently rent registered or unregistered sex offenders. So here in the state of Idaho, we have sex offenders that are maybe unregistered. They had a crime that was pled down to an unregisterable crime, but they are still sex offenders in essence and supervised such as, but I don't rent to any of those people. The people that I rent to, they're primarily addicts that have committed property crimes or drug crimes due to their addiction.
Madam Chair, just a follow up, if I may.
Commissioner Danley, go ahead.
So I understand that you don't choose to do that, but I guess what I'm getting at is my understanding, and I'm naive on this issue completely and admittedly, is that there's generally a distance requirement for anybody who is a registered sex offender. I don't know on the unregistered group, but in order for them to live in a particular location, they cannot live within a certain distance, particularly of a school.
Correct. Schools or daycares. I believe it's 100 yards.
I think that's probably right. You'd probably know better than me. So in other words, I guess what I'm getting at is your property, even if you wanted to, you wouldn't be allowed to because of the proximity right across the street.
Well, not just me not being allowed to, no registered sex offenders gonna try to move in there because when they go to register at the state police isn't going to allow them to register at that address.
Perfect. You said it better than me in a different way. Thank you.
Madam Chairman.
Commissioner Gillespie.
So I have just a question for the city, just to make sure we're all on the same page. So I'm looking at the use tables and the code. Is it the city's position that this is a halfway house or a group home?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, the city has defined this as a group home, which falls under that single family use category.
Yep.
The halfway house is a little more specific and detailed. This particular project falls within that group home definition.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Mooney.
Boise Fire had a comment about R4 occupancy and Google says it's 5 to 16. I couldn't find anything in our code. Is there anything in our code?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Mooney, I don't know that I could speak to that, the fire code specific to the occupancy.
They reference the R4 occupancy standards and I don't see anything in our code that discusses that.
That would be building code.
Okay. Madam Chair.
Commissioner Mooney.
Question for the applicant. As far as outdoor spaces, I just in the pictures of your other properties, they all look like they're very well maintained and taken care of, but it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of gathering or outdoor spaces for the residents. Is that true or false?
As of right now, that would be partially true. That it has a very large yard. And I currently have RKH Landscaping contracted to build a flagstone patio in the, it would be the southeast corner of the property. There's a grove of bushes and trees that enclose it nicely. And then we're gonna plant some boxwood and maybe some dogwood, some evergreen bushes between myself and the east neighbor to give them a little bit more privacy, as well as plant some shrubbery to hide our trash cans because I want my properties to look nice from the street. My properties always look the best. I pay for landscaping, pest control. I pay for people to take care of the weeds and to fertilize everything. So you really can't tell that they're a transitional home. You just think it's one of the better maintained homes in your neighborhood.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Blanchard.
Quick question for you, Joe. What's the typical length of residency of the people that you get in?
I wish there was a typical. My first tenant I ever rented to, he rents from me today. And he lives in an apartment right down the street at 1801 South Philippi. A lot of guys, they transition out, they leave within 3 or 4 months. Some people stay 1 or 2 years. We all grow at different rates.
Follow up if I can, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Blanchard.
And who manages enforces the house rules basically on a daily basis? I'm aware of how encumbered these people all are, whether it's probation or parole officers that they have to see on a regular basis, but just on a day-to-day basis, who's like the house manager and maintaining these rules?
Well, so myself and one other person, we go around to my properties. I have the individual that I spoke about earlier that works for Department of Corrections for 25 years. He goes to my properties once a week, if not more. He does most of my drug testing because I don't like to do that. And I go to my properties usually every day. I'm at least a couple of my houses because my office is right down the street. It's on Franklin, right near Curtis. So I get bored at my office and I want to go out and do stuff. So I go talk to my residents and visit my houses.
And one quick question for Ben, if I may.
Go ahead to Commissioner Blanchard.
Ben, we had a couple of things about stop work orders and that kind of thing. What's going on with that, and is everything compliant with city code at this point?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Blanchard, when the CUP became apparent, my client has not had to go through this process before, so he had started some interior remodel. There was a stop work order placed. It was mostly because of the electrical work that was happening and they couldn't put cover. So during this process, he has been able to get the City of Boise inspectors to come in to look at that, to approve the work that was completed so that he can get that cover completed as soon as possible.
Cool, thank you.
Okay. Seeing no more questions from the commission, then now we will move to public testimony. If you'd like to testify, please come on up to the podium. Unless if your question's been answered, that's fine too. If you'd like to waive that.
I'm on the agenda.
Okay. Please start with your name and address. You'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Steve Shops. I live at 275 North 7 Oaks Avenue in Eagle, and I am a retired geophysicist. And before I get started, I would like to request that this meeting be deferred for 2 months, because the Idaho Power issue is not inconsequential as Ben led it to be. And they are still working on the issue. And it relates to a former mayor of Boise, which according to your display in the hallway out there, was mayor between 1966 and 1974. His name was Jay Amex. He was also the first 4-year mayor of Boise. And he lived in the house with his family in the early 90s. And they had several health effects from the power lines, which are high voltage lines that crisscross right there at the property itself. And he sued Idaho Power about that. They reportedly investigated it and found it to be legit. And they settled the lawsuit by buying the house from him on December 30th of 1994. They then had the house converted to commercial zoning, so it wouldn't be a full-time residence again because of the health issues related to the house, and they didn't want any continued liability for that. And although the former mayor is now deceased, his son, Jay Amex, lives in that same area and was living in the house at the time of the lawsuit with Idaho Power. And I've asked Idaho Power to research this, but it's 27 years old, so their files are probably in long-term storage somewhere. So they need more time to confirm the facts and to tell this story about the health effects. So I would like this hearing to be deferred for 2 months.
Thank you. Is that the end of your testimony?
No.
Okay.
Could I request more time?
No, written by code, each public member has 3 minutes.
Well, in synopsis, this proposed group home is right across the street from a Spanish language preschool, the Puentes Spanish preschool. And I consider this racist to put a group home for convicted felons and criminals right across the street from a Spanish preschool, a very busy Spanish preschool representing a very diverse population, a very vulnerable population. Okay, I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to testify on this item? Please come right on up. Please start with your name and address. You'll have 3 minutes. You can pull that mic down a little bit too. Thank you.
I hope so. Hi, my name is Ruth Maddox. I live at 5370 West Bel Air. I'm next door to that property that they want rezoned. I also am very, I've talked to the Amexes many times down the block. And Don also wrote a text that he asked me to read to you since he could not be here today, so you understand part of the logistics of what's going on with this. So if I can take a moment, I'd like to read this to you at this time. He also sent this to planning and zoning, he said. So I suppose it's on record somewhere. Okay, this is per Don. To whom it may concern, my name is Don Amex. I lived at this address from the late 1970s until 1988 with my parents who lived there until the end of 1994. During this time, Idaho Power installed a high-powered overhead line that produced magnetic power fallout. After my mother had some medical issues, my dad the late Jay Amix hired an attorney that contacted Idaho Power. They did some testing and found that the property is to be unhealthy to live in. Idaho Power bought the property from my parents in December of 1994 and rezoned it from residential to commercial to ensure limited exposure to any inhabitants. In my opinion, it is in the best interest of any future inhabitants for a proper survey to be conducted of the property and the potential harmful effects of the power fallout. I just do not want anyone to have health issues in the future and want to make sure everyone involved is aware of the potential dangers of residing at this residence now or in the future. Per Don. So I just wanted to say that. But yes, I live right next door to that property. I've lived there for over 10 years. And one thing I don't feel that Mr. Howell wasn't truthful when he got caught for no permits and he had to send a letter out to the residents. He said, from commercial to residential. Until he wanted to come to the hearing, there was no mention of a group home for ex-cons with 8 bedrooms next door to me. So, I don't think he's very truthful to the neighborhood in the first place, and he started constructing that prior to any permits, like he'd already thought it would go through without any permission. So, and I live next door and I live with an 89-year-old mother who's there by herself all of the time, and I work. So yes, it's a concern for me, that and a revolving door of ex-cons that are there 1 to 2 years. And I understand the need for the housing, but it's also a little gray saying that you run by and check on your residents, but who's there to really supervise that many people? How do I know?
Thank you, Ms. Maddox. That's the end of the time.
Anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's anybody else that would like to testify on this item, please come on up. I think we're out of people though. So with that, we will move to rebuttal from the applicant.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, Ben Semple. So the lot is zoned limited office with design review. It allows residential use with a conditional use permit. Again, I've done some research on the deed. I've looked at everything I possibly can find. Idaho Power did not have this rezoned to restrict residential use. If they did, I would imagine that it would be a zone that doesn't allow residential use, even with a conditional use permit. If there is an issue, it's a civil matter. My client has not been contacted by Idaho Power regarding this. He has received no information or feedback from them that this is something that they are not going to allow. This is a use that we feel is appropriate here. I would stand for any additional questions.
Thank you, Mr. Semple. With that, we will close the public portion of the hearing and the item is now before the commission.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Danley.
I'm going to make a motion that item CUP 22-7, conditional use permit at 1604 South Philippi, be approved with the terms and conditions in the staff report.
Second.
I think that was a second from Commissioner Blanchard. Is there any discussion? Would you like to start, Commissioner Danley?
Sure thing, Madam Chair. The biggest part of this application for us in front of us today is the conversion of the use from one to the other, but that's permitted. Our code is pretty clear on this, that everything that's being proposed is also permitted. One of the factors that I don't think we've talked about, and I don't think that you don't necessarily need to, but I think we are aware, is that the notion of permitting group homes in this country is an incredibly important issue. It's one that if we deny in a capricious sort of a way, this city is absolutely ripe for being sued, because it's been done all over the country and it continues to be done. But if everybody denied it, we would never have it. And that's a big thing. I'm going to just touch briefly on a personal note. There's in my circle, someone who not too long ago had to basically go through this process and is definitely on the up and up and doing great things. And so this is an important use in our community, in my opinion. It really is. And I think that the care that the applicant has put forth, single person per room, where it's located, by the way, I mean, to me as a planner, I think it's a great location in the sense that it's right next to a bus stop. I mean, literally right across the corner, across from a grocery store, lots of jobs that are close by and so forth. So from a land use and transportation perspective, I think our comp plan would support this, especially as a multifamily sort of an application. I don't see anything in our code that would allow us to deny it. And with regard to the sex offender notion and the school across the street, I think that the community and the folks who raised the issue, I understand that concern, but I'm confident that it's mitigated through not only the applicant, but certainly the state and the process there. So for those reasons, I'm comfortable moving forward and that the terms of the conditional use permit have been satisfied.
Thank you, Commissioner Danley. Any further discussion?
Just real quick.
Commissioner
Madam Chair.
Blanchard.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, conspicuously absent here are the owners of the Puentes Language School. I mean, if they were so concerned, we'd certainly have had them and their 80 people here tonight. I know some of the neighbors on Bel Air, and there's nobody here on Bel Air Street tonight as well. We've got 2 brand new houses that were built there, assuming if these power lines were killing people or making the Amix family sick, it would be happening to everybody, including all the kids at the school there. And we don't see anybody bringing these kind of issues to the table. So, and I do second what Commissioner Danley said, is that this is frankly one of the greatest needs that we have, is being able to get people out who've paid their debt to society and get them into a stable place where they can actually get back into society again. So I commend you for what you're doing, and I wish you the best of luck in this.
Okay, with that, if there's no further discussion, will the clerk please call the roll? Oh, sorry, we have a motion on the table to approve CUP 22-7 at 1604 South Philippi Street. Will the clerk please call the vote?
Stead,
Aye.
Squires,
Aye.
Blanchard,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Gillespie. Infrock,
Aye.
Danley,
Aye.
Mooney,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And this meeting is adjourned. Have a great night.